Our daughter plays
All right, so
for Navy.
like to
Game the night before.
I'd like to call the
I have to start bringing
meeting
my
to
little
order.
xylophone with
Where's
me.
your gavel?
Oh, I gave it to my kids. I'd like to call the November meeting of the Champlain Valley School District School Board to order. We have one adjustment to the agenda. Item 6.0, the K-12 physical education presentation will come right after our learning topic. And sorry for the mix-up in communication to our PE staff, but thanks for being flexible. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda? No?
Have fun? If
What?
your PE staff is flexible.
Didn't even do that on purpose.
Are we
Wow.
not discussing this? Is this just FYI, or is there a place on the agenda for this? Just out of curiosity.
It probably will,
I would say reports to the board.
yep, reports to the board under committees.
We can have, let's add 5.1.2,
Yep,
communications.
yep. So, we're not gonna go read through everything, but if anybody has any comments, yep. All right, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on something that's not on the agenda? I pulled the audience earlier, thought we were safe, okay, thank you. Before we go too much further, it's November, it's the end of the year, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of our admins and central staff for all of their hard work all year. I think it's amazing how many hours you put in after 5 o'clock and before 8 o'clock, so, and your regular jobs. I mean, we just, as board members, we just show up and come to a few meetings, but
Right.
totally appreciate all your extra effort, and I wish everybody a happy holiday.
Thank you.
And we just lost Colleen.
Oops.
So we have one board member joining us by phone, so I'm not checking Russ Caffrey's fantasy football pick. So while I do this and try and get that working, I'll introduce Cassandra Townsend, who's going to do our first learning topic, and you introduce.
So, Cassandra has two hats. Cassandra
Are you there?
is the building-based special ed administrator in Charlotte and also the
I don't know why.
district
Okay.
director of behavior systems. So she is actually going to draw the connection for you, but this is kind of the third in this year's series around kind of how we support all learners socially and emotionally. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me to join your board meeting on this chilly night. I'm excited to talk about social emotional learning. It's something that I have done a lot of work on at the University of Vermont prior to coming to the district or back to the district. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. And so when this was the learning topic, I was definitely excited to be here with all of you. I wanted to just orient all of us here in terms of your journey thus far regarding the learning topic. So all of you have seen, it's my understanding, you've seen the movie Resilience around adverse childhood experiences. You've also had a great opportunity to talk with Joelle Van Lent last time regarding trauma-informed practices. So I'm going to be continuing that journey with all of you this evening. Before I jump into the agenda, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the external factors, the adverse childhood experiences that are really impacting our schools these days. And it may be a little bit different than when some of us were younger, but we're really facing students coming into our schools who have experienced some of these adverse childhood experiences. They are coming in more anxious. There seems to be an increase in mental health needs and supports. We're having many students come in from divorced families, those types of things. So when we talk about social emotional learning, it's really important to think about how do we build schools and systems that support all of our students, especially those most vulnerable? And by supporting those students, we're really setting up systems to support all students. So, what do we do about it? That's where SEL comes in. So when I continue this journey for the purpose of this presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about what SEL is. I want to talk a little bit research, put on my researcher hat, why. So why is it important? What does the data tell us? And then really I thought I'd give you sort of a potpourri of what's happening in our district regarding social emotional efforts, learning efforts. When I think about our district mission, we talk about pursuing excellence. We want students who are able to learn and contribute to society, think, live responsibly and respectfully. When I think about that beautiful tree, I think about what's at the root of it, or branch. In my perspective, it's really that foundation of social emotional learning that really allows our students to attend to academic tasks and really blossom in our schools. And so that's sort of my own bias and orientation in this work, just self-disclose that. But that's really where I think a lot of our efforts should focus on. So what is SEL? Basically, social emotional learning enhances students' ability to effectively navigate challenges, right? Basically, looking at, there's 5 components of it. There's self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relational skills, social awareness. Now, if you haven't been to the CASEL website, this is out of the University, or Vanderbilt University, it's a great lab, if you will. It's called the Collaborative of Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They have a ton of resources if you're interested in learning more about this topic. And also how to implement this type of work in our schools. So why SEL? Why is this important and why does this matter? So essentially, Durlock and colleagues did a meta-analysis, basically a very large literature review. They looked at 273 studies, and these were the big themes that came out of why social emotional learning is so important. What they found is that students who are exposed to SEL in school, they do better than their peers on positive social indicators. So attitudes, behaviors, empathy, increase in empathy, teamwork, academics. They also found a correlation between social emotional learning programming and environments to academic outcomes. So students who are exposed to evidence-based SEL programs are seeing an increase in academic performance, which is very cool. They also noticed, we talk a lot about early intervention is key. Tons of research out there that talks about how important early intervention is. Significant associations between SEL skills in kindergarten and key outcomes for younger adults later in life regarding employment, substance abuse, mental health. So again, I would recommend if you're wondering, if you, again, want to look at more of the information around why this is so critically important, definitely check out this citation, Durlock and colleagues. What's really cool is this is bigger than just our own school district. The conversations around SEL are happening across our country for a very good reason, because of all the research that I just shared with you. But what's cool is the reauthorization or other No Child Left Behind, now ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. SEL is identified as something that promotes students' well-being. So integrating a focus on student social emotional learning needs in conjunction with academic instruction is critical. And ESSA actually identifies that, and it provides and authorizes funding of programs to support this work. So this is big. This is sort of the 35,000-foot view of how important that is. So the framework. I'm a pretty visual person, so I have to do this little graphic. So when we think about our MTSS system, and I have another triangle I'll show you in a few, but what we're really talking about is we want all of our students to be academically successful. We want all of our students to have healthy relationships, feel good, have the confidence, the social emotional learning, and have positive behavior in society to be successful citizens. At the heart of this, and this is what research will tell you too, we can do all these things in isolation, right? Sort of outside the classroom. But what really matters is what's happening in the classroom with the teacher and the student and the relationship, okay? So when we talk about SEL, it's not something you take here and you do it over here. It's something you embed in every aspect of our school. It's the fabric that's woven in to everything that we do. You don't just say, I'm going to go do SEL right now for 30 minutes a day, right? So again, how do we embed that in our schools so that all of our students have positive outcomes, academically and socially, emotionally? What puts this together really, and what are the sort of the decision rules around how do we make decisions around SEL and how do we support it? We look at data to inform our practices, and we rely on the MTSS system as our framework to support, that's the system to support those. What we're finding, and I can speak because this is from sort of my PBIS lens, being a member of the state PBIS implementation team, when you're thinking about implementing anything, one of the things that we have found across the state of Vermont is if you implement anything, could be whatever it is, if you are lacking one of these, your chances of implementing whatever you're implementing successfully goes down drastically. So it's really important as we think about our big system, how are we attending to the systems that support our practices and what data are we using to inform those practices? So we have to attend to all three of those features. And essentially, I think in a nutshell, when we're talking about SEL, when we're talking about academics, our goal is really to meet students where they're at and help them go, help them get to where they need to go, essentially. So, I wanted to talk just a little bit about data. And this is, again, more of a global perspective. I'm not talking specifically about individual schools for the purpose of this presentation. I'm happy to do that at another time if interested, but I took a very big picture view. Some of the things that our schools are doing are really cool in terms of using data to inform what social emotional learning practices, systems we should be doing. So one of the things is we call universal screeners, right? So basically, looking at assessing an entire classroom and saying, okay, well, what are some of the strengths? Who might need a little extra support? We do this with academics. We give everyone a baseline assessment. We say who might need a little bit tier 2 intervention, who might need a little bit more intensive intervention. So one of the things that one of our schools is doing, it's called the Holistic Student Assessment, and it's from Harvard. Pearson is the company that puts it together. This is a self-assessment that our students, that the students do to identify how they feel about their school culture and climate. So it's really cool, and this has been done in the 5th through 8th grade at one of our middle schools. And what we've been able to do through coordination with the school counselor who actually works with this data, determine programming. So thinking about, well, how are our students doing in terms of their own perceptions around school, school climate, school culture? Do they feel that they have a sense of belonging? How can we attend to those so that they're feeling good? So again, how do we use data that we have to determine programming? Another school is using something called the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. Again, these are very different screeners where you're basically looking at which students might need some more support. So pretty simple, and a lot of them are free. But again, using something like this has been helpful for one particular school. Another screener that we often don't really think about, but it's especially for students who are externalizers, so students who are externalizing their behavior, it's visible, is our office discipline referral data. So we can look, and our K-8 schools are actually using this system across the district, Swiss, and they can look at this and say, gosh, you know, which student is really exhibiting high levels of behavior in terms of frequency of out of classroom time. And so that's really cool. So we can say, okay, look at the data to then say, gosh, what supports within our MTSS system would best support that student. So what does it look like in terms of practices in our district? Many of our schools are using responsive classroom and developmental design. This is an approach to building community in our schools. Building that community, having clear expectations of what's expected, really fostering that social emotional development, focusing on relationships, focusing on self-awareness. Advisory is the advisory book. A couple of our schools have implemented advisory, which is really exciting, and this is straight out of developmental design. That's the middle level approach, and responsive classroom is for the elementary. And this has been wonderful so far in terms of really fostering those relationships and making connections with adults, having a sense that I, as a student in a school, matter because I am an adult who sees me frequently, who asks about my day, really taking sort of that big class, you know, and really narrowing it down into sort of that really tight relationship. So it's really great so far. What are some practices across our district in terms of social skills curricula? Again, we're looking at evidence-based, research-based practices, interventions. Many of our school counselors use Second Step. Again, using it at the universal level, so making sure all students in our schools are accessing that. And there's even a level of using this as a Tier 2 intervention with a small group of students who may need a little bit more supplemental instruction or support. Zones of regulation is also, you probably see this in our schools, especially the K-8 schools. You'll see these different colors. It's really helping our students identify their emotions, where they're at. Are they feeling a little anxious? Are they feeling silly, right? So thinking about helping our students identify at what point are they feeling a certain way. Social cognition is also one of the, Michelle Garcia Winner is one of the gurus behind social cognition curriculum. And basically thinking about how your interactions have an impact on other people, quite simply, and vice versa. So focusing a lot on perspective taking, which many of our students who are coming from adverse childhood experiences or trauma, they need a little bit of extra practice in that sometimes. So thinking about that. There's also things out there that I've seen in our schools, Kelso's Choice, thinking about matching our emotion with the correct sort of experience. So is it a small problem or a big problem? Sometimes what kids perceive as what actually is a small problem is a big problem, and vice versa. So getting students and children to really understand that. And then use skills. This is again, this is actually a student from Charlotte. This is a program to really help elementary students identify and understand sort of emotions and social skills, and it's pretty cool. So thinking about, so we talked a little bit about the data, we talked about the practices. Now I want to talk very briefly about the systems that sort of hold this whole thing together. Now you all have seen this. This is the MTSS triangle. But without this, our interventions, it would be very difficult for us to match interventions with the supports that our students need. So as with social emotional learning, any topic, academics, we want high quality first instruction. That is the foundation. And again, that goes back to the relationship between the classroom teacher and the students. We want that in place for all of our students. Okay? This system allows us a safety net to catch some students who might need some more support. Okay? That's where Tier 2 or targeted supports come in play. Tier 3 or intensive level of support is another way to catch students. So oftentimes, if a student, whether it's social, emotional, behavior, academics, if they're getting high quality first instruction and they're still struggling, we're going to be looking at the data. We have tiers, we've got systems in place to look at that data to say, gosh, what interventions would help this particular student? Right? Similar to the intensive. So if a student is receiving small group, targeted interventions and supports, maybe they need more individualized instruction. And really what separates some of this targeted and intensive levels of support is frequency and duration. So increasing the frequency of the intervention and lengthening that intervention. PBIS. I can't do a presentation without talking about PBIS. The state team would be very upset with me. So PBIS is the MTSS system for behavior. Some people liken it the same. You can have you may see MTSSB, so MTSS for behavior and MTSSA for academics. PBIS is an evidence-based practice for creating a culture to hang, basically a framework, to hang all of those wonderful evidence-based practices, like responsive classroom and developmental design. They're not separate. They work well together. So what you'll see in our schools, and we have our K-8 schools are all implementing PBIS, is they have clear behavioral expectations. They explicitly teach behavioral expectations repeatedly, not just once in the beginning of the school year. This is something you have to do repeatedly, just like 2 + 2, right? You'll see systems for acknowledging positive behavior. Some people worry about the word acknowledgement or reward, but I prefer the word feedback. We give students feedback on their academic performance. We should be giving them feedback on their behavior in schools and let them know when they're doing something right. Because if we don't, they don't know, right? And then we have just other systems to support what happens when a student engages in a behavioral error. What is our process for that? How does it respond in a way that engages family involved in that process, helps the student sort of right the ship. So who is involved in this work in our district? These are just a few folks that I wanted to highlight here. In many of our schools, we have school social workers, we have school counselors who are critical in providing this support. We have school psychologists, we have planning room directors, we have behavior coaches. But I would argue it's not just these folks, it's really all of us. All of us in our schools have a responsibility to focus on the social, emotional learning and behavior of our students. Outcomes. These are just some of the outcomes that typically we see in PBIS schools and schools that are implementing social, emotional learning curricula. What we have seen in our district, and you'll see some evidence in the next slide, but we've seen an increase in fidelity of implementation in some of our practices, PBIS in particular. We're seeing increases in academic performance when schools are implementing PBIS with fidelity. Schools and teachers have told me on-task behavior, again, their data system, you're able to track sort of what are the most prominent behaviors that are happening. Our school leadership teams are actually looking at the data and saying, gosh, what's the most significant problem behavior our school is having right now? How do we counteract that? How do we reteach the expectation? We've heard from parents and staff in particular that through emphasis on PBIS and also social emotional learning activities, they're feeling there's a consistency in the approach, which all students need that level of consistency. Same with adults. We like to know our boundaries, right? What's expected of us. And then what we're also seeing is a decrease in discipline referrals. So traditionally, students are sent out, they're suspended. We're trying to counteract that because again, we may be inadvertently reinforcing problem behavior by sending them out of the classroom. Because if they're having difficulty with academics, or they're having difficulty socially with their peers, we have got to counteract that. We're seeing decreases in suspensions in many of our schools and a decrease in disruptive classroom behavior. One of the things that's very exciting is we were recently acknowledged, our K-8 schools were acknowledged at the annual PBIS Leadership Forum in October for our efforts in implementing PBIS with fidelity and also demonstrating positive outcomes for our students. So this is us. You'll see some familiar faces there, but that was really exciting to be part of such a great group of, to be in a district that prioritizes this work and to be acknowledged for that. It was a wonderful experience. And then one of our schools was also a recipient recently, because of PBIS efforts, there was the Youth Hero Award, which is really exciting. So COTS nominates a school or nominates youth for the Youth Hero Award, and one of our schools was nominated for that. Outcomes and acknowledgements, again, just talking a little specifically about highlights. So Kathy Batty from Charlotte and Mary Morosky, school counselor and PBL coach coordinator, they won this really cool competitive grant. They got to go to this wonderful conference, and it was about improving learning environments that foster social emotional learning in really cool, innovative ways. So that is something to be really excited about, and they're able to share that work with other folks in our district as well to continue that. So we'll continue learning from them. There were another effort is really focusing on classroom management for folks, including myself, from different K-8 schools. Were selected to be part of a pilot with classroom management guru Brandy Simonson from the University of Connecticut to really focus on how do we sort of take PBIS, that school-wide PBIS practices, really into the classroom where students are the majority of the day. So that's the work that is ongoing. And then what's really great is our school counselors are continually evolving and aligning their work with CVU graduation requirements. So that's, again, a way that we're connecting K-8 and CVU and the future for our students. This actually, I just went to a presentation yesterday, and I thought I would share this in terms of CVU's effort around paving the way for PLPs. And I love this. Alan shared this with us. All CVU students should graduate with a powerful sense of their strengths, challenges, interests, and purpose. And what's really cool is that when we're talking personalized learning plans, that isn't separate at all from social emotional learning. They're very much intertwined as well. So again, I think if we can continue to make that connection between all of the great work that our district is doing, it will only help to further that. So taking into account each learner's unique interests, strengths, and needs, POP, personalized learning, also should emphasize social emotional learning, mindset, dispositions. So again, it's really a great opportunity to fold those two together as a district. So what's next? Again, this is sort of big picture thinking, but I think we have a really great opportunity with our new CVSD in terms of increasing professional learning opportunities for staff around SEL practices and efforts. We have a great opportunity to align our data, our systems, and practices with autonomy, but equity. Those are the buzzwords. Equity and autonomy, okay? Got to find that balance, but this is a really critical time for that. And then really thinking about increasing cross-CVSD collaboration. This is, we've often, before we're CVSD, we're little bubbles, right? We're working in little silos, and now we have this great opportunity to increase collaboration. It's been wonderful to go to other schools, to hear stories of what's happening. I steal stories all the time, or I steal best practices. It's really great. So that is what's next. And I love this, because this, I think, speaks to sort of the optimism that is SEL. What will the new year bring us? 365 opportunities. So thank you very much.
Are you using screeners at the high school at all, or are the guidance counselors at the high school level doing programming and implementation of the programming based on student needs in the same way that happens in the K-8s at all?
You know, that's a great question. Oh,
Yeah, they're putting together a plan that has everybody running through the developmental assets that we spoke about in the very first presentation. Adam and a group are working on that. I'm not exactly sure where they are, but there's quite a bit of momentum, and there should be something pretty soon.
You can see the difference in kind of what you're screening at the high school level, but because by then it's very much more focused on them and what they know about themselves. And so, good question.
I guess, I don't know how to phrase this question, but I'm just gonna say it anyway, but like, with PBIS, like, how much of it is, like, what about the behavior is about assimilation, and the kid's like, oh, I have to behave, I have to do this, whereas part of life is protesting and challenging, and not necessarily disrupting, but, like, how do you prevent that? Like, it just sounds.
No picketing.
it's like the equity and autonomy. You gotta find that balance, right? So how are we teaching our children to engage in that, right?
Right.
That's important, to advocate for themselves, to believe in something strongly, and maybe buck the system once in a while, right? I mean,
But getting a penny for
but-
PBIS isn't quelling that, you know? That's still healthy in our
No,
schools,
but
okay.
That is part of SEL.
Okay.
Like, that is building that confidence to really understand, what do you believe in, what do you value?
Yeah,
I'll be honest, PBIS and that token system, it's really about changing the adult behavior. It's really about reminding ourselves as the adults, because we can't change necessarily a kid. I can't change your behavior, but I can create a learning environment that
Okay.
will support your behavior. So again, thinking about it that way, but yeah, it's that balance, right?
okay.
I think I answered your question.
No, it's just,
It's a good one.
It's a good, I love the way you put it back on, it's the way that adults remember to acknowledge this. Okay. It's not kids saying, oh, I have to do this in order to get it. Okay, got it.
It shouldn't be that way.
Okay. Cool. Man.
I have, it kind of piggybacks on this, I was debating on asking it. How much do we engage families in social and emotional learning?
Good question. Well, you know, I think a lot we communicate via newsletters. I think that's an area we could definitely strengthen through PBIS. We often have rollouts to families during open houses or different activities that our school is doing, so trying to embed what we're doing and communicating. But I think that's always an area that, that we can always improve upon.
Do we have, like, so for instance, I think academic expectations are somewhat clear. Like, I know for my first grader, I'll get, like, this is what we're doing in math right now with this unit. Is there anything equivalent to that? Like, these are our social, emotional learning topics that we're working on. Since it's almost like another subject at school, in some ways it's woven in throughout the whole day, but.
Yeah, so again, a lot of it comes from the classroom teacher in terms of collaboration with whatever the unit is. We have our school, many of our school counselors are pushing into classrooms and communicating. Again, it's not necessarily taking students out and removing them from that environment, but bringing them into that environment and generalizing those skills. And so a lot of communication happens that way through the teacher lens and our school counselors who are doing some of that work.
So for the top 5% of students that really needed that target intervention, what outside resources are you using to support what you're doing, if any? Social workers, primary care offices, family?
Yeah, so there are, I mean, it really depends on the individual team for that student. So we have mental health, we have a lot of collaboration with mental health agencies, Vermont Family Network, other agencies to support. We have something we call a care conference where we bring in a pediatrician to help problem solve with the team. We have coordinated service plans. It's called Act 264, which is a vehicle to collaborate and bring in Department of Mental Health, DCF, to support the effort around a particular student. So, and what we often use the word is wraparound services. So how are we really fully wrapping our most vulnerable students who need that intensive level of support? So there's a lot of collaboration happening, and we have great partners with the folks that I've worked with personally through mental health and other supports. Great question. Thank you.
One more question.
This might be more of a question for Megan, but how much are you guys doing in terms of like data dive at the kindergarten level and then backwards design from there of like early intervention? Where are we seeing needs? Are things popping up more and more in kindergarten and pushing our need to reach even more pre-K students, and how can we do that?
Yeah, I can speak to one of the opportunities that we have now that we have so many partnerships with community-based pre-K. We know a lot more about our kindergarten students when they get here, at least a pretty high percentage of them. Mm-hmm. There's mandatory data collection, teaching strategies gold, you probably know about it if you have preschoolers, that those community-based partners are required to collect, and that looks at kids across the developmental domains. A huge one is social emotional learning. I would say that one of the core pieces of work of the early ed leadership team is figuring out how to make better use of that data, because K teachers really do have it at their fingertips, but it's different data than we're used to looking at and collecting. Doesn't give you a score. Mm-hmm. So that's one of our goals, is to know more about kids when they get to kindergarten. Because we have it, now we're at the point of figuring out how do we use it. And then I would also say the same experimentation that's happening and piloting about universal screeners, those things start in kindergarten as well. So it's a good question.
Great, thanks, Cassandra.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cassandra.
All right, next up, have our PE team.
So while they're getting set up, I just wanted to remind the board that this is the year-long focus on our essential arts. Last month, you heard from Jeff Evans and some students who were here to talk about why we value these programs, what the research says about having healthy essential arts programs, and we heard from some students saying what it meant for them. Tonight we have our PE teachers who are here to present to us on what it looks like. They might dabble a little bit into the high school, but mostly the focus is K-8. And I also wanted to remind the board that the reason we do this, the reason we have a 3-year cycle of bringing presentations to the board on essential arts and co-curriculars, on academics, and on student support services, is to ensure that you, the board members who represent your communities and you are responsible for the education of all the kids in the communities, are the most informed in the community about how our schools work, right? That's one piece of it. And then the other piece of it is, I very often will get calls or emails from parents saying, you know, I'm wondering about such and such, and when does the board ever look at this? And it's wonderful that I can say, we have a 3-year cycle, and next year we're going to be doing a deep dive in. So I just wanted to provide that context before we hear our speakers tonight.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
I think this is the largest group we've ever had present to us at one time.
Hooray, they deserve an
Yeah.
applaud at the front end.
It might take all 25 minutes right now.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Sunder, the principal at Charlotte Central School. And I'm Allison Selmer. I'm over at Shelburne Community School. And we were the administrators who were lucky enough to work.
Wait, they raised their hand first.
We volunteered, yes, we did.
Thank you.
And we were lucky, I think, to get to work with this excellent cohort of physical education teachers in preparing to come and share with you a little bit more about physical education K-8 in CVSD. And I don't know if you can read this, so do you guys want to come out if you're here, if you're present for this? Some people aren't here, but so from Ellenbrook, we have Lynn Porter and Dustin King. And Williston Central School, we have Kathy, Lynn, and Dustin. Sure. From Heinsberg, we have Chris Shackett and Cindy Stanley. From Charlotte, we have Matt Kent and Nihad Zakovic. And from Shelburne, we have Kelly, Craig, Jude, and Mary. And we're going to turn it over largely to our teachers.
So we had the opportunity to spend some time working on putting together our presentation, and we wanted to highlight what we do in physical education, but also what we do as professionals. Because there are a lot of people in the physical education department that are doing a tremendous amount of work in the professional realm outside of our gymnasiums also. So this slide just kind of points out that we got some people coming here with some good things going on. We've got a lot of award recipients, award nominees, and this just speaks to a few of the things that have happened over the course of the year. I'm not going to point out that I've got the longest list only because look at the youth over there and the age here. There's a big difference. This is a slide of a few pictures of what kids are kind of doing at Allenbrook. Put up a variety of different shots. We're learning, we're moving, we're having fun. Some of it's collaborative, some of it's work, teamwork, some of it is individual skills, and it just kind of overlays an idea of what kinds of things are happening in our gyms. So our physical education mission statement is to develop physically literate individuals who have the knowledge, skills, and confidence to enjoy a lifetime of healthful physical activity. We adapt our instruction to meet the needs of individual students. We have a clip we'd like to play you. Hopefully we can hear it. It just speaks to what physical literacy is all about, because we don't believe necessarily that everybody has the same level of knowledge. So we want to share this clip. They're cute, aren't they? Yes. Want me to narrate badly like an old Japanese film?
Probably should be making noise now.
Yes, it should. I think what you would have heard there, besides some dialogue, is the squeak of the whiteboard marker, maybe?
might have to come back to the video.
We may have to come back to the video. So I guess the learning cue on this one is, don't make assumptions that everything works without having tested it first. So basically, physical literacy is the same as what you would consider as literacy within a classroom. The ability to take the knowledge that you're working with and given to have a lifetime of wellness and fitness and health. So literacy is the aspect of learning beyond the movement, putting the movement together with the learning to create the whole picture, the whole puzzle.
So our PE programs across all of the districts, we actually came together at the start or end of our school year last year and at the start of this year and worked really well together to try to create a unified program. So our main PE program is sort of designed using 5 main power standards that are the national PE standards, the Shape America standards. And this will sort of list all 5. I'm not going to read them to you. But you'll continuously see that word physical literacy as an important piece. Vermont adopted these national standards about 2 years ago. So through our work together at all the K-8 schools, we took these 5 power standards and tried to create some statements that we felt were our I can statements that students could work towards. What you want to know about these is that it isn't just 5 standards, but within each standard, there are grade expectations and skill or movement concepts, behavioral, cooperative, how you value or how you work towards your own personal fitness and wellness. It's all broken down everywhere from kindergarten all through 12th grade with grade appropriate expectations. So we have a few slides that follow this, and we just wanted to give you an idea of the 5 main power standards. And through our next couple slides, we're going to show you the I can statements that we created together, and with some pictures and a little bit of talking, just a little bit of evidence as to how we're working towards those. So Shape Standard 1, our statement was I can demonstrate competency in a variety of motor skills and movement patterns. So this is a standard that's working towards all of those motor skills, whether it's your basic locomotor skills such as skipping or running, all the way to your more manipulative skills, striking, using a racket, using a bat, using different equipment. So a few examples here, we're working on some kicking skills with soccer, underhand rolling skills with a bowling unit, great body awareness, movement skills with some yoga, manipulative skills, drums alive, lots of fun there. The ABS in-school snowboarding program working on balance, catching. So this is really a big all-encompassing standard. It's very focused and can be more focused on the lower grade levels where they really start to learn and build the skills. And as students transfer into the middle school program and the high school program, they'll tend to start to apply those skills into activities. So just an example of a few things that are going on with our Shape Standard 1.
We also had notes as to who was on what slide. That doesn't show up there either. So Shape Standard 2 is I can apply the knowledge of concepts, principles, strategies, and tactics related to movement and performance in a variety of activities. So you can see the wording on that is a little bit different. It's taking a different focus. And these are some of the things that we're doing. Shelburne is doing an ultimate handball and strategic sideline planning. So cooperation is involved there. WCS has got San Newcomb volleyball. That's an inclusive activity. Yoshi, chasing and fleeing, a basic skill, dodging. And Treasure Island at Heinsberg. And apparently we can't access the video either. There was a very short video clip of some Allenbrook school children doing a dance. Me? So Shape 3, I can demonstrate the knowledge and skills to achieve and maintain a health-enhancing level of fitness, activity and fitness. This speaks to the more physical fitness aspect and less of the skill aspect, which is a little bit tougher as far as how we assess that, because we know a lot of that takes place outside of the school. So what are we doing to link what's learning in the school to how our students perform outside of the school? Shelburne's got a fitness unit. Charlotte's got an ultimate disc group that's definitely a skill that's translatable, very active in the communities these days. Allenbrook does jogging miles, and the children have the opportunity to bring in slips that tell what they're doing for jogging or walking outside of school with their families. Heinsberg's got some snowshoeing going on, and Williston's got a really nice disc golf course. Again, another tremendous lifetime skill.
So Shape 4 is basically talking about personal responsibility and behaviors, social cooperation, working together, safety with equipment. So these, all of these standards are things that we see every single day in our classes, and we can reflect a little bit here. So listening and following directions, moving safely, responsible social behaviors, cooperation, sportsmanship, teamwork, all of those things. So we have Shelburne has cross-country skiing. That would also be a safety thing with equipment. Allenbrook, working cooperatively with hula hoops. That's called a castle, with a little activity that we all use. Cooperative games is pretty much the theme for most of these. Using Plagnets to assess student learning targets. Kelly, you going to talk about Plagnets? At some point. Just a little setup, a little hook. It's coming. Allenbrook hula hoops again. We've got some, let's see, conflict corner and PBIS star chart. Yeah. Williston, archery with safety and equipment. We have an archery set up. And so a little bit of everything with the social and personal piece, taking investment in your own and others' learning.
Okay, so I have the last standard, and this was the only one where we struggled to use the I can, so if any of you have a way to fit it into this language, but we came up with my positive attitude and active participation demonstrates that I value physical activity for my personal well-being. And this is one of my favorite ones because I think that it really speaks to the student voice and choice. We're giving the students a lot of different opportunities, performing different lifetime skills. We tried a personal choice unit, so we had bunch of different activities going on at one time, which was a little chaotic, but students were really engaged and participating fully. Heinsberg has their awesome new climbing wall. I think this is Williston, right, with your fitness warm-up, and then team fitness at the elementary level, and then Charlotte with CCS Smiles, which I'm not sure exactly what that is, so, and then the walking program. So a lot of awesome different opportunities for students to engage in.
So I'm Matthew Kent. And this is our first year at CCS. Yes. We're honored to be there. So you're going to see on this slide, so we've only been there for 3 months. So we're still trying to build the program. And you're just going to see a couple slides here from the last 3 months. Nihat does a great little program with the kids he can tell you about.
Sure. So basically what I'm having them do is I'm trying to have them understand the importance of just exercise, walking, jogging, and running. I give them the opportunity to do whatever they feel, which one of those they like to do, and have them understand that that is important. Even walking is exercise. And so I try to track how many miles they do in each month. We start each class, 3 minutes, walk, run, or jog, and I document their laps that they do. And at the end of the month, I'm able to tell them how many miles they traveled through within that month. So for example, last month, the whole second grade did a total of 79 miles. And I tried to address it to something that they know of, something that is that far that they could relate to. So I was like, Jay Peak Water Park. Have you been there? Yeah. Absolutely. Jay Peak Water Park? That's 70 miles away from here. We went there. All right? So our goal for the month of November, we went to Jay Peak Water Park. Our job for November is to come back.
You're just going to see various slides of kids doing different activities, badminton, soccer unit, kids having fun, just different things. I think overall, just our program identity is just trying to help kids understand the value of movement and activity for health reasons, for recreational reasons, and for social interaction reasons. So that's what we're trying to do at CCS.
You might be picking up on a pattern that there's a lot of common language that happens throughout our district. You heard about the social emotional learning, you're hearing about it from us as well. That's a really big part of what we do, but we are also linked into the CVU graduation outcomes. So we look at the leaves as we create our framework of learning for our students as well. And we have got some CVSD common assessments. These are things that we worked on as a K-8 district that we felt very strongly about in these grade levels that our students should be able to achieve. So we have created standards based upon these assessments so that we can then take that and have learning targets for those assessments as well. These are what we would kind of look at as anchor tools that we use with our kids, that, you know, there's some indications that if you're not able to skip by second grade, there's aspects that link into other learning factors with that. We know that kids that can't sequence the skip may also have some challenges with reading because it's a broken apart step. So these are things that we looked at in physical education that we felt very strongly for our K-8 system should be common assessments across the K-8. Early essential education. Some of our schools are providing our pre-K, early essential education students an opportunity to have physical education as well. This helps to work with the students that we know in many cases have been identified for various reasons so that by the time they're kindergarten ready, they've also had some pre-learning and come in and be more successful with their kindergarten peers in the physical education aspect. So these are just some of the overview outlines of activities that we do with that particular grade level.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Shackett. I am one of the health and PE teachers at Heinsberg Community School. This is my 8th year teaching PE in Vermont Public Schools. My 3rd year at Heinsberg.
And I'm Cindy Stanley, and I also teach health and PE. This is my 13th year at HCS, and it's about my 20th year teaching.
Yeah, Cindy and I both have our master's degree in education. We both are dual certified in K through 12 health education and pre-K through 12 physical education through the State Agency of Education. Insight into our program. You can see Cindy put up some great pictures of what we do on a daily basis. Further insight, we're very busy over at Heinsberg. We each teach 7 40-minute classes a day, whether it be in a health classroom or in the gym. With those 7 classes, we're together for about 3 to 4 a day combined. In our one gym, we see, with those combined classes, we see up to 45 kids at a time, just because of the dual classrooms that come in. Other times, whether it's myself on a prep period or a lunch break, Cindy's in the gym alone with one classroom, so anywhere from 15 to 25 kids. I just prepared a few bullet points that I'll read to you about our program, and then we'll be on our way. The Heinsberg Phys Ed program has been created with all the best practices in mind. Our program is built upon our state and national standards as well as the CVSD Common Learning Targets. I like to think of our program that we have 3 core covenants or objectives, those 3 being fun, learning, and respect. So at any given time, we're trying to represent those with our students and have our students represent them back. Fun. Through the use of choice, challenge, and change in every activity we do, all students excel and have fun. Learning. 2 parts of learning. Students learn all essential skill themes through their K through 8 experience with us. When I say skill themes, I mean anything from throwing, catching, jumping, landing, striking, kicking, tumbling, etc. One of the reasons I love teaching phys ed to K through 8 students is because we get to teach life skills as well. So students are learning personal responsibility, cooperation, communication, respect for others, positive competition, critical thinking, and problem solving. It's our desire at HCS in the phys ed program to offer a developmentally appropriate phys ed curriculum. We offer enjoyable, all-inclusive physical activities designed to build self-confidence and promote cooperation, fair play, responsible participation, while encouraging lifetime fitness pursuits. Heinsberg PE provides a wide variety of activities that are action-packed, providing lots of choices and opportunities to challenge children with countless opportunities, no matter their skill level. The curriculum that we like to represent ourselves as, we've moved away from comfortable, familiar, functional phys ed to movement education. We like to call it movement education. It's instruction that is rich with opportunities to engage in fun, challenging, and dynamic experiences. I would like to end with just saying what you see here, I like to just tell people in a nutshell, if I had to advertise for our program, we cover 4 components that make up what this is. That being stations. Some classroom teachers call it skill centers. That's where we introduce those skills I referenced earlier to our students. We like to call ourselves learning coaches, facilitators. We stay back unless we see that the skill needs fixing or a student calls us over. The second component of our program, educational games. Taking those skills from the stations, placing them in a fun game, which may or may not take them away from thinking about the skill, rather than just having fun in the game, tricking them into learning the skill or tricking them into exercising, if we can be straight up. Dance. We like to do line dancing. We'd like to make that bigger in the future. We're working on that. Trying to show all of our students that dancing is fun. Last piece is warm-ups. We like to teach our students how you get ready for exercise, whether it's adding in best practices of fitness or playing a fun tag game, and then mentioning how that warmed up our bodies. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
We have the opportunity as professionals to be able to attend conferences, workshops, further learning opportunities, thanks to the schools being able to provide us a pool of money to utilize for our professional development. This highlights some of the things that some of our people are doing this year. If you look at the Shape Vermont Conference, you can see that most of the teachers that are here attended the Shape Vermont Conference. We value the professional development we get from learning new ideas, new practices through attending conferences and from our colleagues across the state. We've all been trained with the Tarrant jump rope, both individually with coaches as well as groups, and working on the jump rope reporting system. Several of the teachers, because the national conference was held in Boston last year, had the opportunity to go to the Shape America conference, and it was a tremendous learning experience. You take what we have as a small state and magnify it. It's just so enriching. The Eastern District Conference, many of us are planning on attending also. That conference is being brought to the Sheraton in Burlington, Vermont this year. So it is a local conference for us, but bringing in people and presenters from Maine to Pennsylvania, New York, as far as Puerto Rico. And then we've got a few people that are serving in some roles that enhance the professional environment overall. I happen to be the current president of Shape America Eastern District, hence the reason why it's coming back to Burlington. Because I wasn't going to go to Maryland and try to run a conference not knowing anything. Easier to not know it here. I'm going to be going to the Pennsylvania State AFERD Conference. I've been asked to go down and speak and to serve on a panel that will be bringing in administrators and talking about the value of what quality physical education is and why it's important to maintain physical education within our schools. Chris is the chairperson for the Vermont State Middle School Fitness Competition. That brings in students from all over the state of Vermont to compete in physical fitness components. And Kelly Spreen is on the executive board for the Vermont State Association. So you can see that we're all very actively involved in our organizations as well. Is this still me? Which is this community connection? Yeah? Yeah, it's all you. Sorry, are you sick of me yet? Because the title of this slide that you cannot see is Community Connections. So what we did was put together a slide that talks to how we communicate with our communities. What are we doing to get our information out there about what your children are doing in physical education and health? Many of us have curriculum nights. In fact, every school does. So we're there to talk about our programs. As parents come in and go to the classrooms, they have the opportunity to talk with us as well. We have open houses in many areas. And for all of us, I think it's pretty uniform that parents could schedule a conference anytime they want to. They call, we answer, say, sure, come on in, let's talk. What's working, what's not working, how can we make it better for your student? How can we enrich their learning in physical education? We all have blogs. Many of us have other social media accounts, Facebook pages. We've worked through our school newsletters. Allenbrook has a monthly fitness fun calendar that the students can choose to do. If they do half of them, they earn a little token at the end. And then the special events that our schools have for primarily physical education and health. We have a jump rope for heart. We have fun days. We have family activity nights, middle school fitness competition, dance performances, cross-country skiing field trips, and theme weeks. So it's a very enriching environment both within our gymnasiums and in the broader picture of what the school offers.
So, you're sick of me. We are trying to keep a lot of things consistent within our district, but we definitely have different spaces to offer programs. So you guys can click on those and take a look at the gyms. If you don't know what the Williston gyms look like or whatever. Oh, somebody's gonna click, here we go. All right. It's just pictures of our gymnasiums mostly. There's some outdoor spaces, and there's another slide later that shows that the different places that we run our classrooms. There we go. Charlotte. Overview, nice. Shiny floors, nice.
We like that.
Yeah. Heinsberg, there it is. Shelburne. What do you call them? Big gym, little gym, mini gym? What do you call them? Big gym. There you go, big gym, little gym. All right. Kids in the view, nice, moving. All right. Yeah, all right, Williston. We have our 2 gymnasiums. Some people might notice that this one has a new ceiling with a little renovations. Both gymnasiums, we don't have on there, but there's another slide that shows you. We have a sand volleyball court. Who has that? That's crazy. We have the skate park, nice. Skate park, we have, we flood the ice rink, we have a disc golf course, and so people have climbing walls and all that kind of stuff, but different places where we present our programs, our classrooms.
So the top of the slide says age groupings. So I believe this is the biggest school district in the state of Vermont. I think we are the biggest, and I think we're pretty much closest to one of the largest. So we have in these 5 buildings plus CVU, we deliver the programs a little bit differently. So for example, Allenbrook School does pre-K, is the only school in the district that does pre-K for a PE program.
So
What's the black on
if you
the
see, that's okay.
Oh,
If
that's
you
because it's
see-
middle school.
Yeah, well, if
Yeah.
you see Allenbrook first and second grade, the yellow is all together, that means some of the classes come together as first and second
Right.
graders.
That's
So
right.
the dark lines indicate that it's separate, but if you look at Williston, we
there's
don't
one.
have any of these. We
But you
have
have
third and
third,
fourth
fourth.
together, and 5th through 8th together in PE classes. Sometimes it's a 5-6, sometimes it's a 7-8, but it can be a 5-8.
Eight,
So the
mix.
color kind of breaks down what grades we teach and how they come to us.
Yeah, so that's just a quick look at how it's delivered over the ASU. Classes frequency and duration. So again, here it's broken down, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It's pretty much 40 minutes. That's the average class time in the district. Charlotte's lucky enough to get them 50 minutes twice a week. We here in Shelburne, the middle school comes 45 minutes twice a week. Williston Central School is the only school that does a 6-week rotation, 2 times per year, 40 minutes, 5 days per week. That's a little different delivery. So that's the frequency and duration of the
classes in the SU. And
This is Will's.
So Lynn McClintock actually left to deliver a program to the community in our school, so she had to leave, and she really wanted to talk about this, and she would have done a much better job. She's really funny. Biking program, a lot of places around the state, we get bikes donated, local motion. We have the path in the back, and I will say to you, Lynn McClintock has probably taught 40 or 50 people in the last few years how to ride a bike who have never ridden a bike before. We deliver to fourth graders. So that's a pretty amazing thing. We have rings, and so there's a person kind of traveling rings, so we do a nice tumbling. We call it not gymnastics, strength, balance, and flexibility unit, because that's what we do. Cooperative activities, a little bit of step aerobics, and some fitness. Here's Lynn McClintock leading Follow the Leader, or warm up in our strength, balance, flexibility class. Adaptive, there's a young man in a wheelchair, and he is doing striking with the tennis ball hanging from the string, and that is his. We have outdoor golf, first tee program, national program. We've got some
Cooperative games.
Yeah, cooperative games, capture the flag, that's a crowd favorite. And of course, again, this would be Lynn outside when it's probably 20 degrees, maybe not, playing games and just moving outside, outdoor activities. Nice variety for all our kids, and it's all about keeping them moving, and we do offer kind of like an elective program where students have some choice. So these are activities that we will put an array of 4 or 5 activities up on the board. There are some lifetime or individual activities and then team activities. So they kind of get one of each, team and then a fitness or a lifetime activity. So a lot of variety.
Yeah, and our thought is just, can we provide a nice wide variety program where we try to find something that a kid can connect to? And can we look for new ideas? Even ourselves, we're trying something new right now that I'm learning myself as I'm teaching it to the kids. So looking for new ideas, a nice wide variety of programs, just a little snapshot of some things that we do.
so, not unlike our spaces, where we are so different in what we have for teaching opportunities because of our spaces, we also have a variety of different equipment spread out. We put this together just to show that we're using a variety of equipment that may not be available in all of our schools, but through collaboration, we might be able to share and tag team and say, hey, you know, I'd like to do this, I'd like to try this. So the special equipment that Allenbrook has is an indoor snowboarding program that we work collaboratively with Burton on to try to create a whole in-school curriculum. So we were nice enough to get the benefit of that. And we have a Drums Alive program, which is a rhythmic drumming with big physio balls. Great fun. The kids love it. You can see that across the line that it even varies from the projection technology. Some of our schools have it, some of ours don't. Some have heart rate monitors, and some are trying to get them. Some would love to get them, so that varies as well. And we have some fitness centers, disc golf courses, sand volleyball courts. We're very lucky within this district to have all of the opportunities we have across the district. So as coming together as a K-8, it also gave us an opportunity to see how can we collaborate to use what we have K-8 wide as well.
Okay. I think there's a little bit more to it.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't assign myself to this one, so I'll just swing it. But this is just some of the different technology we try to use throughout the different schools. So heart rate monitors, like you saw, some of the schools have them, some don't, but they're obviously an awesome resource for students to get instant feedback on how hard they're working. Pedometers, all the schools 4 through 8 are implementing the FitnessGram, so that's another assessment that we use. Cameras, iPads, videos to give students instant feedback on their skill development. And then using on our end Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook for also collaboration with other colleagues and other resources that we can bring into the classroom. Google Classroom for assignments, taking class surveys for student voice and choice. Speedometers again. The plickers and the plagnets, here you can see some of the students using them over there. We'll have a chance to use them later. It's a really quick, easy way for us to get feedback from students and also for them to self-assess, and we can get some knowledge base. It's like one of the quickest ways to do it in phys ed without using like a pencil and paper. Geocaching, or caching, brain breaks, and then video analysis as well. And then, so there you can see a student just analyzing somebody's stride, and then I only know this one because this one's me, but this is an app that we used for a scavenger hunt throughout the whole school campus where they could run and find different points. Oh, this is me. Okay, so this one I'm ready for. So I didn't bring enough because I thought there wasn't going to be more than 10 of you, so I'll just quickly give these out. So these are the clickers, and we came up with a learning target for you guys to kind of assess your learning of phys ed and what we kind of just presented to you. So the way that it works is you'll see A, B, C, or D. An A would be equivalent to a 1. So with support, you can identify the components of a standards-based PE program that develops physically literate children. 2, you're beginning to identify, so maybe you can't recite the whole presentation, but you can pick out a couple different things. A 3, you can identify components of a standards-based program that develops physically literate children. And a 4, you can identify and advocate for the components of a standards-based. So think about yourself, you're self-assessing. Whatever your choice is, you're just going to put that on the top. So if you think you've met that, you can do it. You're a 3, put a C. And if you are still working on it, you're a B, turn that to the top. And then if you can walk out of here and advocate for a standards-based PE program, you can put a D. And then show them to me. And just make sure you're just holding the corner so that like your finger's not in it on the sides. And I'll show you how quick this is. So in my classroom, you can link it to a projector, put it up on the screen, and you can get the instant feedback. So it could come in a bar graph. For right now, since it'll be anonymous, I'm just going to get it. So you'll see how quick they are. Show it to me. Jeff.
I'm sorry.
And your fingers are in it, just hold the corner.
I
Okay,
want you to
so
know.
it comes to me like this on a bar graph. One of you, unfortunately, says that you cannot. So whoever it is, I'm just going to call you out on it. Whoever's number 10. Because you need some support in advocating for it, because you did A. 4 of you feel like you can identify components of it, and 4 of you feel like you can leave here with a 4, and you can advocate for standards of a PE program. So who's number 10?
I said I need support.
But as you can see, like at the end of class, I can literally do it in like a minute, and it's way easier than like collecting an exit card or anything like that. So I'll just.
Can we do these on
Come on out here. Everybody. See, I'm the senior. I can do this. Everybody out here. So we took this picture at Shelburne last year, or the beginning of this year, actually. It was an in-service time. And it was just a fun picture. And this is us saying, this is what we do. We play, we learn, we teach, we have fun. And we want to thank you for the time tonight to present our session. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So you said something that was really interesting to me about how sometimes skills development or lack thereof can be indicative of other learning issues that students may have. So how is that communicated by you guys back to the classroom teacher? And you know, probably the same thing for music or art or some of those things. You know, how do you collaborate with their classroom teacher to say, you know, someone's doing really well here, somebody's struggling here, that kind of thing?
It's a really good question, and I think probably each school may do it a little bit differently. But we all have the opportunity to speak with any of our teachers at any time and say, hey, you know, let's talk. Is little Johnny struggling in your area? Because this is what I'm seeing in my area. What can we do to build these skills to help work across the spectrum? We speak with our special educators. We have the opportunity to do kids talk, raps. We can bring needs forward for EST as well. So through collaboration with our peers across the curriculum, we're able to speak directly to the needs of the children and hopefully develop a broad-based learning experience.
Is there anything formal, though, to make sure that that happens?
We continually assess.
Okay.
Absolutely, we continually assess. If we find that a standard is not being met by the end of that second grade year, we're going to look for that child in skipping and really work on breaking that skill down and trying to get that skill there. Does it always happen? I'd like to say yes, but no. I mean, in reality, it may not. That child may not ever be able to sequence those steps, but we've identified the child, we've given them the additional time, and we're working collaboratively to live
Together.
Forget it. Together. We are working together to try to build a full learning experience for the child.
Thank you.
They also have adaptive PE sessions.
That's what I was gonna say too.
Yeah, so for instance, my daughter has special needs. She has regular classes 2 times a week. She's a first grader. She also has an extra, what is that, half hour with you, Lynn?
Yes.
It's on Mondays, so she gets the extra practice because she can't skip.
It's coming.
I know.
One of the
she's
other
working
things
on
we're
it.
doing in Shelburne too, and I'm not sure about the other schools, but we are, the essential arts people, music, art, and PE are all part of the morning meetings. So we are traveling around the school, spending a little time during the morning meeting time. So it's an opportunity for us to see the children in another place. It also gives me and the other teachers a chance to have a conversation with the teacher to say, you know, I'm seeing this, are you seeing this here? It's a great time for collaboration. This year, personally, I'm trying to put some brain break into that morning meeting too, using, using the whiteboard and trying to do some brain break stuff with the kids to get them moving first thing, just a couple of minutes. But it's a great opportunity to be able to collaborate with the teachers to say, these are some things that I'm seeing, are you seeing them too? So that's just a...
I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we also work very collaboratively, there I got it that time, with our PTs and OTs within our schools.
Yes. Yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier that you all keep some kind of a blog or Facebook or social media. So is that linked up to our new CVSD Facebook page as well?
No. I will speak for the Allenbrook Facebook page. It is not. I
Okay.
don't want it to be a public group. I would allow anybody that wanted to come in that I knew had connections to our children to have access. But because I put a lot of pictures out there
Oh, I
of
see.
children,
Yeah.
I don't want it in the public domain.
I see. So it's more of a private Facebook group? Okay.
But on our school websites, there are
Yes.
links to our blogs.
Yeah, so on your school websites. Okay,
Yes,
great.
individual
So that's
websites.
via
Yes.
okay, just for communications, yep.
Yeah.
This might be a really naive question, but I think about the socioeconomic diversity of our CVSD district, and you were talking about physical literacy, and you hear about the rise of all these private clubs, and, starting at what, age 2? I'm not sure when, but it seems like it starts earlier and earlier. Is there differentiation in PE? How do you address what is, I'm assuming, might be a growing gap between skill levels?
So I would say, anybody can jump in on this, but I would say that the way we build our program, we offer a lot of choice and we offer a lot of challenges for the students to work at whatever level that they're at. So we may be doing a T-ball striking unit where the kids are working with a variety of manipulatives. In the striking, there may be somebody that has a bat that's got a head this size where somebody else has a bat that's a normal wiffle ball size. We might have a larger ball. We might have a different height tee. So the children can make the choices. Now, if we see a child go over, grab the big bat, the biggest ball, and they're knocking the ball across the gym, we're going to go and challenge them to try a different structure.
Or
that's
use your
gonna be
left
more
hand or
yes.
your non-dominant
So
hand.
we build a program that will reach all of our levels of children and try to engage them in their highest level of ability.
I think the club piece that you're talking about too, Lynn, is that, that plays itself out more in the athletics after school, where you see that maybe the haves or the have-nots or the people that have had more opportunities since they were 2. And you'll see differences in abilities and such there. But in our classroom, it's the cooperative stuff, it's fitness, it's personal fitness, it's, and I never keep score in anything we ever do. What's the score? Don't know, doesn't matter. So, and that frustrates the competitive people, but it's really the social piece and the fitness piece and, fun, friends, and fitness. There you go, for the younger kids. That's
And
it.
if I find a child that's exceptionally skilled in a particular area, maybe we're doing a soccer unit. You can tell this child's been playing soccer. I may use them as a peer teacher.
Exactly.
And have them help work with a child that's not quite as strong so that they can bring that child up to a greater level and they can work on some leadership skills in the process of doing it.
I always think 3 words when I'm thinking about working with that diverse group. Be flexible, adapt, be willing to be creative on the spot. You really have to be willing to be flexible in that moment. You have to think creatively. You have to be willing to adapt what you're doing to meet the needs of those individual students. I know we all pride ourselves on that. So.
Yeah, go.
We know that activity has to happen every day as adults, and so the structure you talked about, how do we, with the limited time, increase that? I mean, every academic area, every unified arts wants more time, but I know, so what do we do? How do we help that?
Well, you heard a mention of ESSA money earlier. Physical education and health are also now mentioned within ESSA. So that is a pool of money that is also available to help enhance learning in the specialized realms. That money was never there before. So that's one pool that we could access. The reality is, right now, the way our programs are built, we are maxed out in facilities, we are maxed out in time. So I don't think you could look at any one of us up here that wouldn't say, we want quality daily physical education for every child in our school. It's not the reality of what we have. We don't have the facilities, we don't have the teachers, and without adding more to those, we can't do it. So what we try to do is to build in activities that will take these children and have them move their bodies outside of school. And hopefully create programs where they want to move outside of school. And they're gonna, they're learning disc golf and they find out that the rec department has a disc golf program. They're excited about it, they're gonna get involved. That's the hope.
Brandon, and then.
Yeah, you answered my question.
Oh, we did? Okay. That's great. Appreciate you folks coming. Thanks so much. That was a great meeting.
Thank you.
So we're going to move to committee reports. So 511, finance, budget, and facilities.
So the Finance Committee is meeting during budget season to kind of get ready for budget season. And so we held our meeting last week after the budget forum. So basically, and the meeting minutes will be coming. The first quarter FMR we're actually going to talk a little bit about later on. The student enrollment projections, I think everybody got those through an email, and then I think they were included in tonight's board packet. But we briefly looked at it, and the general consensus is, as we talked about last meeting, enrollment is projected to be fairly flat for the next few years. There's always surprises in kindergarten, but in terms of the budget piece, Elaine really takes that information as she looks at the equity matrix, which will come up in December. We did review the first draft of the budget, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And then we actually didn't really do a budget forum debrief because we didn't have any data or information to really talk about the budget forum. The one interesting thing that did come up in our meeting, and when we started talking about the budget, is I was trying to figure out what the Finance Committee's role was in terms of the budget. And I didn't realize at that time that actually there had been a charge that you guys did a year ago for the Finance Committee, which I found after the meeting. And just to review, because I'm sure you've all been thinking about what our role has been. But our role, and I do think after this budget cycle goes through, we'll need to revisit this because we've already changed a few things. But our role, just as a reminder, in the budget process is to develop a rigorous budget development process, perform initial reviews of the budget process and assumptions, and participate in a feedback loop through financial performance review. In addition, the committee will analyze and prioritize the budget and scope of facilities requests. And I think you'll see when Jean does her presentation, that last piece about what the board, what the Finance Committee is thinking the board goals are for the budget process. So I think that's kind of where we are.
Great.
Any questions?
Thanks. For communications, I don't know, did you have a chance to review this from Barbara Ann? Yeah. Any comments that?
Well, I thought it was interesting. So we, in lieu of our communications meeting this month, we had our budget forums. So that's kind of where we're going, and we're just continuing on our strategy of communications towards the budget process for this, at this time. And to that end, we had this online questionnaire that people could come to, which surprisingly, we had 23 attendees at our community budget forum, which was pretty big for our budget forums, but 57 respondents to the online. So that, unless someone's doing it 56 times and then there's one other person, because I was like, that'd be the way to do it. But that wasn't me. But
The responses were disparate enough where we really.
yeah, I was like, really? That's like a marketing coup right there. 57 responses. But it was. I thought it was really positive. I actually read it to my son. I'm like, wow, this is good news that the respondents really were passionate about the caliber of teachers and the effective practices, and you can read the outline. But I thought that a lot of that was really positive, just positive, and reinforcing that it's not, like, they understand that what they want, low student ratios, that costs money, like performing to certain standards, having specialized programs, all that comes with like a price tag. And then some of the suggestions I thought were, just thought were really interesting too. And I thought that it's great for us because as questions like, is the busing system, for example. We're doing a lot of work with the busing system. You know, that's great. So we know one of our letters in the springtime or next year, like we need to address the busing system. So this, I, as a communications person, look at this as like an outline to what our future letters and future blog posts and things should be about. So I thought it was really positive.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
Were you surprised? Like, I was really surprised.
I mean, at first, I looked like at how many staff were in the room and board members, and I was a little bit worried. But then as we broke out, I was surprised there was great input in each individual group, so.
Does every town have a budget buddy? I'm just curious, or do we have enough budget buddies?
My budget buddy from Charlotte is here,
Yeah.
Jeff Martin.
Yeah.
He is here.
And
Do we have 4, 5?
I think Kate will probably step in and be our budget buddy for Shelburne. Did I see a note about Heinsberg today? Somebody from Heinsberg?
Yes, it was. Pauline said she had somebody.
Okay.
Yeah, not
yet.
I attended the Heinsberg meeting with Colleen, and there's actually 2. There's a second one.
Okay.
Forward getting information.
Yeah.
And I still haven't had a response from anybody at St. George, but
No.
I've shaped a few trees.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we had more than 2 people or 3 people. It'd be good to get,
Yeah.
David told me we were limited to the 5. That was our initial goal, 1 from each town.
Yeah.
And then fill in if we can. That way, everybody has an extra person from a community.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. All right, so with that, we'll move on to cult report.
So I know Kate Webb was here, and I think
She just walked out.
left. But I
Yep.
hope that you noticed in the Colt report that Jean and Megan and I met with Kate Webb and Mike Yantachka, and there are a couple things on the agenda tonight that we talked about at that meeting. Social emotional learning and the adverse childhood effects was one of the things that they had on the agenda that they wanted to talk to us about. And the whole privacy thing with hosted services was another thing. So I appreciate that both of them also came to the budget forum. So it's nice that the legislators are taking an interest in what's going on here. Hey, Mark, maybe you want to do the rah-rah about the healthcare signups.
So there, I mentioned in the report, but I'd really like to give kudos to two folks in the HR department, Sean and Kelly, who went out to all the schools and made sure our employees were signing up for their healthcare, which is changing. January 1, all brand new healthcare. You all may remember this from last year. It was kind of a big topic. But this was the actual nitty-gritty of getting the paperwork done and getting the information out. And they spent a couple weeks out at schools traveling around and giving information. And we had a presentation from Laura Soares from VHI, which was here at CVU that we videoed and put on YouTube for everybody to watch and get educated, because you know, it's the biggest benefit we provide, but it's also the most important thing we provide is people's health care. So they're nervous when it gets changed. So Sean and Kelly did an excellent job of making sure that all got taken care of. And I just wanted to say thank you to them in public and on the record.
Thanks.
So is this the healthcare that was projected to be cheaper for the second half of the year, and the governor got involved and took a bunch of money away, and then now is projected to be more expensive in the coming year?
That would be the healthcare.
Okay.
That would be the same.
All right.
You can see why there's maybe a little confusion about it.
Okay.
Megan, maybe you want to highlight the professional development that our speech-language pathologists are getting and that you've coordinated?
Sure. This is stemming from work that we've done with speech pathologists over the past number of years, trying to understand what their role is in a multi-tiered system of support and how do we maximize the use of that resource and be really efficient. It's also connected to our district management council back then analysis, where they gave us a lot of information about how we are using some of our interventionists and speech pathologists in particular, and really pointing to, in a lot of cases, we aren't maximizing the skills that they bring in support of both the students that they're targeting, but also kind of the whole. So we're contracting this year, and we're very excited because Dr. Aaron is a very well-respected, nationally recognized SLP in the area of MTSS. She's out of University of Central Florida, and we're using grant dollars out of the special ed grant to fund a year-long study with our whole speech pathology team. So they'll have 3 face-to-face sessions, they have monthly group coaching sessions, and then she does individual coaching. The coaching is virtual, she doesn't travel all the time. And it's really focusing on what are evidence-based practices and how do we support SLPs in developing a menu of service delivery options that's more effective and also more efficient. So we're really excited to have her and to start that work.
Thanks. And lastly, I don't know if Joan or Russ would like to say something about the VSBA conference that you both attended? I.
You think we remember any of that? Oh, it was memorable, all right. It was something. Been on the board, I don't know, 10, 11 years, first time I've actually been to it. To be blunt, I'm not sure I'm going back. It was something. You know, one of the things that when I say that is just the very different interests, I think, and the very different experiences that, you know, we have and that many of the Chittenden County districts are going to have compared to the experiences that, you know, some of the much smaller districts are having. So it was, like I say, it was quite an experience. I'm glad I went. I think it was, you know, really opened your eyes to the differences that we have, and I think when we're talking to our legislators who, I guess you had to head out, but, we need to recognize those things, and we need to make sure, I think, that we're advocating, we figure out how to advocate for our interests that may be different than the interests of other districts around the state, because they are very different.
For me, I've been several times. There were a few things this term that had snags in them, but I almost see it at the opposite, that we're all struggling to do the best we can for our students. And how are we going to do that? How do we represent our communities and communities of students, parents, those without kids in school? And how do we reach them and have those conversations? I think CVSD has always, or most of the time, been ahead. So I agree that we have a lot going for us. But there's a
Now, some people
common-
there might have argued that we're doing it the wrong way, with what we think are some of our advantages in the things that we've accomplished. There are others there who would, think that that's horrible, the things that we've done and how we've embraced operating as a consolidated district.
It shows the differences around the state, but that we really are all, and people have been there 1 year as a school board member, or 40 years, or whatever, but that we want to do the best and figure that out. And I think there's a commonality with some of the things that are best for all students, regardless of economic and number opportunities.
One of the things I think that caused a little bit of the focus differences this year was that they changed the voting procedure, so that in the past, anybody who showed up had a vote. So if all 12 of you showed up, you could all vote. And so imagine, like, in some districts send everybody every single year, other districts don't send anyone. So this year they changed that, and they said every school district will get one vote, and that's why we had the big conversation. Well, people who were used to showing up with like 12, 15 board members and getting 12, 15 votes weren't really that happy that they felt their vote got diluted. Other people felt, no, finally it's fairer, so there was kind of that tone. And
Or they should have proportionate voting depending on the number of students you're representing.
that will never pass. I will put my bet on the table right now.
It may well be that the fact that we're still going through a lot of the changes related to Act 46
Right.
put a different tenor on
Yeah.
it than it may have had in the past as
Right.
well. So, there's certainly that.
He enjoyed the
possibility.
time with me, right?
Oh, we all had a
I
great
was thinking,
time.
who else was there? Joan and Russ and I. Joan, Russ, and I. had-
We didn't do so
had
great in
together.
the trivia game. We kind of.
Yeah, no, we didn't do that well in the trivia game.
Okay,
We had good meals
this is the
together.
first time Elaine has exhibited a tiniest bit of even sarcastic insecurity at the hands of none other than Russ Caffrey.
I'm not sure if I.
Yeah, no. Wow.
Any-
Love it when people pile on Russ.
Absolutely.
Any questions? Anyone about the Colt report? Any questions about the principal's reports?
Actually, I have one question.
Yeah.
Did I read that 55% of our high school students apply early decision?
Yeah, that was in the CVU report.
It seemed a remarkably high number. Is there any color on how
No, I
that
don't,
came
but
to?
I'm guessing that more and more kids do that because that's a
ups your
safe.
chances.
Yeah, it ups your chances. First of all, there's a better, right? You have a better chance of getting in. And,
Was it real early decision or was it early action? Because there's a difference.
there is a
Could
difference.
be a combination.
Yeah, and maybe it is a combination. I can get some more information about that, just kind of like how it breaks down, but I'm not, oh, well, let's ask our students.
I applied early because I knew that I was going to need to pick one choice at some point, so I can use that early decision ticket to increase my chances of getting into whatever school my first choice was. So, Yeah, and for early action, I had a lot of friends that applied because they were like, well, if I get my Common App done to apply ED to this school, and these other schools I'm looking at also do early action, I can just apply that. So,
Thanks.
Good luck.
thank you.
Okay, all right. So we'll move on to the first quarter FMR. Are you gonna run that, or is Lynn gonna run that?
I can give you the broad overviews, and Jean can fill in the details, because there are some details to this. If you'll notice that there aren't, usually in our FMRs in the past, we've had real specific numbers attributed to what we're forecasted to end the year with, and that's not here yet. We're 3 months in to this school year with a brand-new budget. And so it's a little hard, and not only that, but categories have been shifted around. So it's hard to compare apples to oranges and to tie everything down. But Miranda and Jean feel pretty comfortable that even though specifics aren't in there, we're still looking good. Life is, we're not looking at ending the year in the hole. I think the big thing that we noticed, well, there are two big things, not so much with the general fund, because, you know, we don't have a whole lot of detail on that. The interesting piece is to the food services. Heinsberg actually had a fund balance. That CVSD now has a fund balance in food service, which is a really good thing, because food service is one of those areas that was kind of, the subsidy was under budgeted for this year, because not every school budgeted for a subsidy in the past. And so when this year was budgeted for, we only really accounted for 3 schools worth of subsidies. So food service is going to be tight this year, but we do have a fund balance to draw on. And then this other piece, the big piece on the construction fund, it's going to be a bigger conversation that the Finance Committee can actually come back with when we talk about O&M, which is the second week in December, I think, is there is that $600,000 left over from the Shelburne project, and how is that going to be utilized? And that'll get tied into our long-range capital plan.
I think we have to be really clear on that. One of the conversations we had in our breakdown, and I went to the Shelburne group, was about that amount and what happens and the understanding of it. So I think that it's going to be more sensitive, more, we've never had this experience of the paying and the fund balance, so.
And it's gonna be sensitive, it's gonna involve lawyers, and
It's going to involve a lot of discussion. I
Well,
agree.
And the good news,
yeah.
there is a good news to this.
Yep.
It won't happen again, right? Because any other bond that CVSD goes out for won't be specific to one school and specific to one very specific project. It's going to be a CVSD bond. But I hear you. It's actually interesting in the community forum notes, there's kind of the same issue with busing, like, well, how dare they take our buses? We paid for those buses. How can, and I'm thinking, I don't think so. But it's just, it's an understanding again.
Just want to be sensitive.
But that 600,000 piece will be, hopefully it's a one-time deal.
Well, one could argue that Shelburne, that Wilson may have that problem, but I'm not sure they're going to have a surplus.
We're working really
So,
hard to keep that.
yeah, I know that the project was planned, the bond was passed by Shelburne, by the Shelburne board when it was a single board. It was voted on and approved by Shelburne voters, but I thought that as a consolidated district, that debt service is all folded into the larger budget. And if there is, whatever left at the end of the project, in the past we would, oh goody, there's 600 grand that we can spend for Shelburne. I assume that this goes into the broader fund, construction fund for the whole district. But I don't know how, if everything was built in Shelburne that was planned to be built, and we were fortunate enough to come into budget, I don't know how Shelburne's interests, and I live in Shelburne, are being prejudiced. That, why is this potentially an issue? I get that people will be in the kind of mindset that we were before we were a consolidated district and think, oh, well, you know, if that money's gonna get spent on Williston, but Williston's paying for that bond just as much as Shelburne residents are paying for that
So I
bond.
don't-
Conversation in our small group was not understanding that.
Right.
Yeah.
Shelburne bonded and Shelburne paid, now we have to share.
Except for Shelburne didn't pay, everybody
Exactly.
is.
And we did explain.
Well,
that.
see,
That's what I'm saying, people didn't know that.
That's an article,
I mean,
right?
that's an article. If we get to this crossroads for communications purposes, we can talk about why, but thankfully it won't happen again. But in the case of Williston, if Williston goes over, right, we wouldn't go back to just Williston, would we? And say, oh, Williston, you're over, right? We need more money.
They're not gonna go over.
No, but I'm just saying, right?
You're right.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
And I just asked the board for a
Wait,
little
wait,
patience
hold-
on this
hold-
because, okay,
hold.
go ahead. Because I'm just gonna say, because we're coming back for a capital plan later, so,
Right.
not now.
So I was just going to say, I remember around the study committee table, you know, early on when we were looking at what each school, you know, how each school was going to benefit from the consolidation when we were just talking about dollars. And it really looked at one point when we were looking at per pupil expenses that we had two schools that had very low per pupil expenses, Shelburne and Williston, and other schools that had high. And then once we factored in, and I think it was your chart that you brought in, and we factored in the deferred maintenance. And we factored in what we were anticipating to be the cost of that and did a per pupil as if that had been built in there. And all of a sudden, the per pupils were the same across the district. That's what equalized it. And so, to me, that's part of the thinking around this, that it's, you know, people had low per pupil costs because they deferred maintenance. Once they joined in the new merger, that kind of was a reason to support the bonds in Williston and Shelburne at the time. And to say to Heinsberg and Charlotte, you should be supporting this because you're going to benefit from, you know, their low per pupil. Anyway, I think that the sooner we get to one big happy family, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, but I mean, the level that's down there, it's one level below this conversation, and I totally understand this. I'm not saying it's Shelburne's money and they can't that it's not going anywhere, but I'm saying that there were a lot of people that worked super hard to manage the contingencies in this project so that the $13.2 million that we needed and then stuffed into $9.2 million could be addressed. And so that's the confusion of what's this $600,000 for? Is it left over from stuff we'd like to do that we found out? No, we're not gonna build an athletic field like the example that they gave us. We're not gonna do that. We're working on stuff in the school, so.
Halfway to a turf field, a CBU.
That's right, that's right,
There you
so.
go.
But like Gene said, we're gonna talk about it the second week in December.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, are you ready to move on? I jumped the gun.
we could move
Sure.
Sliding right into budget?
Yeah.
So, the Finance Committee had a recommendation that it might be helpful to the board to just briefly touch on board's role, given that this is, you know, role in the budget development, given the, that this is kind of new for all of us. So we're gonna start with that. It kind of leads into something Lynn mentioned, which is the board is tasking the superintendent to meet their goals, and yet we never really had sort of a formal discussion of what those goals are, so we're trying to play catch-up on that. And then I'll show you the high-level first-pass budget. I'm going to apologize right off the bat, is that I kind of ignored the whole community input in here until it was all of a sudden like, oh geez, how did I got the first-pass budget done, and I haven't incorporated the community input. But if you remember, we started the process by saying, Elaine, here's our goals, and here's your financial target. Go bring us a first pass, and then the board gets involved with changes they'd like to make to Elaine's vision for moving forward. So I would say that community input is part of that next step, okay?
And Jean, I would say from a communications superintendent's perspective, that's how we viewed it too. We didn't give any time for you to use the information for this first pass.
Yeah, since I just got it today.
Yeah.
I'm good, Kelly,
That
but not
wasn't
that.
the intent.
Great, okay, thanks. I just feel bad because I didn't even mention it here. So, there's 2 pages, board's roles and responsibilities. These are right from the board retreat that Bob and I did this presentation to the board. And just kind of a reminder, the board's responsibility is to represent the community on expectations and affordability. That's the main goal. The board sets policy in areas like class sizes and offerings. Now, this is specifically board-related, topics here, not all board's responsibilities, but, so it sets policies where it's appropriate and then accepts or rejects the recommendation of the superintendent on other things that aren't really set in policy. This third bullet, the board provides direction to the superintendent on spending priorities through review of educational outcomes and board goals. And we're going to come back to that because, as Lynn pointed out, we never really had a conversation about what those were. Board negotiates compensation. So going down to the next one, we focus on the board's prioritization of equity. We're going to see that on December 5th. That's the regular ed discussion we'll have. Prioritization on achieving consolidation savings. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Oversight of special ed service planning. Megan's going to be doing that in a few minutes. And the last one is on the 5-year capital plan and other operational efficiencies, and you'll see that on December 19th. So if you see, most of those are covered. The one that was kind of a glaring oversight, I guess, was the goals. And I'm going to let Elaine talk to these a bit because we definitely pulled these off of the superintendent's goals.
Right. And I think that there are a couple places that we pulled it off of. One is your own mission vision statement, right? We always go back to that and say, this is kind of our North Star. And so if we're developing a budget, the resources that support our attaining our mission and vision, then we have to start with that. We also look at, what does the state say about what our education quality standards are? So we look at that also. And then, to Jean's point, you guys have always done a really thorough process of doing the superintendent evaluation, which involves looking at what the goals are. And honestly, I believe that I take my goals from you. It's not like I'm on my own thinking, what do I want to do now? I'm listening all year long to what you're talking about, listening to the conversation. So when I come back and reflect that to you, I'm really reflecting what I'm hearing from you. So from that, this year, in the last 2 years, the key board initiatives that I heard were proficiency-based learning and grading, personalized learning focus, success for all students. That's that whole achievement gap piece that has been a goal, board goal, for as long as I can remember in one shape, form, or other. Positive climate and culture, and social emotional learning supports. That comes from the retreat as well. So the superintendent evaluation process, the retreat, the vision mission statement, the EQS, all of that is in context and in backdrop for the development of the budget. We also look at ensuring that there are adequate resources for all of our students. And, what has become like the term that we use, everybody's using now, equity and autonomy, and how do we ensure that we get that? And I know that that's a board value. So last year, when we first shared the equity autonomy matrix, that's like a really 1,000-foot level look at how do we compare? And at the time, we were using words like projects. We're going to look at each one of those components, dig deep, and figure out, what does that really look like? And we've been doing that this year. So that becomes part of the goal, is understanding, for instance, one of the ones that we've really looked at, the first one we looked at was the intervention system. What does that look like in all of the schools? What is the ideal framework look like? And can we look you in the eye and say, either we are already equitable and they're substantially equal resources behind for each kid, or, as I've said pretty often, are we on the 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan? Because some things might be a 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan. So there's that piece of it too. We've also had a process with the principals that we stole right out of the special ed playbook, which was to start having regular education service planning meetings. So that is something that special educators have been doing forever, probably. That was how special ed budgets are developed. So we've done that. That's been a way to ensure that the principals were involved in this process, even as they handed over the, figuring out where to put the monies and making sure that it all added up to the central office. So there's a pretty rigorous process there. And we've also, like in the backdrop, we've been looking at different systems that we can use that could provide greater efficiency and that effectiveness and efficiency. And lastly, this was from the board retreat, looking at providing services for communicating our budget. Last year, at the end of the budget season, when we were reflecting on the budget, we said we need to do a better job with that. And so I think that we're, that's a big check mark in my book. I agree with Kelly when she says, and Dave, 27 people showing up for the first ever consolidated community forum at a centralized place, I think was really good. Now, in some cases, there were only 1 or 2 people there. I was in a group where there was only one person that wasn't either a board member or an administrator, and we had a great conversation. Really was. I mean, I thought that if there had been 10 people there, it might not have been a richer conversation. So I think it's a place to start, and I think that it's been good. That's been really good work.
So I would challenge the board when as we're going through the budget, not necessarily tonight because it's a very high level look at the budget, but as we get into each individual budget meeting, to keep this sheet out. And really, our goal should be, is the budget that is being presented that we said should only cost this much providing these. I think that's the board's challenge to the administration, and I think that's what we should be asking the questions about. But
thank you. Makes sense.
So is there anything missing from here, or anybody think that we misstated something or didn't understand? There's a lot to absorb all at once, but in the future, what we'll try to do is put the goal discussion up a little earlier in the
right
before we finish the first best budget.
Hey, it's going to be transition year 3, and we're going to have a lot of things better. Continuous improvement.
Okay, so we'll jump into the highlights. This is a very high-level pass at the budget, but the highlights are that we are presenting you with a budget that meets the financial targets. So it's got 2.3% increase. The salaries are at the contractual level. They're partially offset by the retirements that we know about, where I think we had 12 or 13 to take into account. That went a long way towards helping us achieve the 2.3%, to be frank. Benefits, yeah.
Looking at the retirements, do you have the opportunity to go back and look at historic data and see, is this a normal year? Can we expect more?
That's coincidental. Mark is looking at that data.
So across I can compare it to the last couple of years. It's more than we've had in the last 2 to 3 years. Not expect exponentially more, and then we would expect probably a couple more. There's incentives for certain members to tell us early, but not for the entire. Not for the entire situation.
Good question. Benefits are down. We did get $400,000. I think we were expecting closer to 8, with the calculation, but that was before we factored in the fact that the premiums are going up 10%. So with that factored in there, Mark and Miranda have gone through this, by the way, personnel and benefits by name to get them right. And what we don't have in here yet is the actual selections of the plans. So we did is we said, well, if they took a family plan last year, we're going to assume they take a family plan. If they took nothing last year, we're assuming, did you assume single or nothing?
We assume nothing.
Yeah. So now that we have the data, before January, we might have the opportunity to be able to put a sharper pencil to that. But right now, it's just assuming they took the same plan as last year.
So I have a question about how we how am I gonna word this? So we had the different plans, and were we incentivizing people to pick certain plans by saying, because we said that we would pay 84% of premiums and 16%, they would pay 16%? Is that like across the board, or do we say we're gonna pay 84% average and we'll pay?
So you remember when we settled, in particular the teachers, that 84% was of the CHP gold plan.
Right.
And you take that money and pick another plan, with that amount of money to the teachers.
Got it, okay.
It's fixed.
That would explain, okay, got it.
So there's also, we have this HRA, it's an employer-funded HRA for the teachers. You don't, I think conservatively assume that 75% of that pool would be used. That's higher than the guidance. We're being told we could go as low as 60, but 75, it's our first year through, a little conservative there. We have the long-term debt number baked into this. Going down to the next page, this is the.
Is that long-term debt increase? I assume that's in the annual debt service?
Yeah. So those are sort of the financial ones we baked in. The ones down below start touching on actions that we've been taking or decisions we've been making. We've baked into here several equity adjustments and things like class sizes, student support, non-personnel spending. You'll see those on December 5th in more detail. We have quite a bit of operations. Well, the operations spending is per the budget assumptions. So if you remember back, we did this in September, the price of gasoline goes up or fuel oil, those are all in there. A little bit of increase in software, in tech. The next one down, this is Innovation Fund. I just want to, we've mentioned this before, I think. This is $100,000 that we have baked in, and we've managed to squeeze it under the 2.3%. As we were forming the district, there was a lot of concern from some people about the growth of bureaucracy and how that's going to slow everything down if you have to wait for the entire system to agree on something before you can try something innovative or creative. This Innovation Fund was something that was kicked around quite a bit. It's very important to a lot of people. So we have managed to put it in. What it would be is a fund that we're hoping that the board will support as a line item fund. And what it does is administration will bring ideas to Colt and say, this is something we want to try, we think will be great for kids. Elaine and probably Jeff and Megan will figure out if that's the right use of the funds. It's like a pilot fund. They try it out. It may be even we have to pilot it for 2 years, but at some point a decision would be made to stop that or to expand it, whatever. But that's the intent of this, is to keep us from getting too bogged down in bureaucratic decision-making.
I can give you an example of that. A few years ago in Williston, Walter Nardelli, after he had attended a conference with Megan, and at the time it was Molly and I in Boston, on creative ways to look at school scheduling and the school day. And he came back and worked with his program council and made a pitch to the school board about offering some teachers a 4-day work week in exchange for having them come in early in the morning and staying till 5 at night, and targeting the kids that would participate in the programming that would result in that. And it would be providing like very focused intervention for a certain group of kids 3 days a week. And then the fourth afternoon of the week, it would be enrichment activities connected to what they were doing with their intervention system. That was so successful that in the next round of negotiations, we built it into the collective bargaining agreement so that we could be flexible about that. Without money to offer, and I know I just met with Walter last Friday and asked him, it was $20,000 that he needed to pilot that. A hugely successful, good program that has expanded now. It's not just the targeted kids, because other parents said, how do I get my kid into that? And they found creative ways to let even classroom teachers participate, even though they're there 5 days a week, in the after-school part. So that's just an example of the kind of thing that we want to make sure we always, provide the opportunity for people to come up with those great ideas that make a difference.
And last but certainly not least, I've listed the consolidation savings that we have baked into the first pass. It's adds up to $222,000 for the year, so we're sort of on our way to the 1.5 million. It's growing every year, but you can see the breakdown of that.
Can you explain what retirement recapture is?
Other people would call it clawback.
Yeah.
No, so what this is I told you that we had several retirements, and this is the savings from those retirements, which we have not chosen to reinvest in the school. That will go back as a savings to the community. Now, in the past, individual schools would have making those decisions, and they might have come back, but we're making the assumption here that would have been reinvested in the schools. Now, since it's coming to a centralized decision-making point, that money's going back. It's coming off the top.
It's the difference of a senior
Right.
faculty member versus a new one, right?
So that's the number that's associated with that first slide here. It says, partially offset by retirements.
Yes.
Right, but the number that's coming out of the retirements is more than that, but I've taken out some positions that we're considering putting back in, adding. That's as part of the decision making. Because I think, at least I put my other hat on from the board position, and we were very concerned about counting money as savings that we're just spending, right? That we're just going to reinvest without giving it back. So I'm only counting the part that I can put my hands on and say that's going back to the community. It's not getting
Is that direct? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that directly related to the consolidation though, or was it more just kind of something that happened as a byproduct, but something that could not have actually been savings? Because like you said, the towns could have used it as savings in the past, right? So I'm just trying to make sure that we make a clear association, like this is something that is definitely happening because of consolidation.
The way I see this is, if we had a teacher retire at Charlotte in the past, and we were just Charlotte, even if we were going to replace that teacher with whatever you budget an incoming teacher at, there still would be, what, $40,000. I've been on the board since 2008. We never returned that $40,000.
Well, it's
We
exactly,
always
yeah.
reinvested it back
That's like
into
what
the
happened in
school.
Williston last
In other words, you
Right.
spent it.
We spent it. And this clearly is, because we're consolidated, because there still was that delta, and we are replacing some of the positions, but we're not, that 122 in the past would have been spent, but it's out here right now, and this board, I guess, could decide otherwise. We're not spending it. And I don't think that would have happened if it wasn't for consolidation.
I just want to make sure we
It's a
can make
bigger
that.
pocket.
Yeah.
It's a bigger district, a bigger pocket.
I think a really good example came last year. So Williston had a retirement of a teacher, and then Heinsberg needed a teacher. So that was, I think that might be a good, it's a marketing thing, a communications thing, but I don't want to, we don't want to seem like.
I think it is a little bit different. I
think.
think they're two separate things, though. So in that case, absolutely, that's one example. But the other example is if I'm a principal and each year I'm building my budget and I have, all these positions in there that, or people in there that the instructional programming is in my budget, I'm the one who's coming to the board and saying, here's how I want to spend this, right? The instructional budget is not, the staffing part of that is not in the K-8 budgets anymore. It's not in the local budget. So it comes to us. Well, actually, the principals have asked that. What's happened to that money? It's going back to the taxpayers. That just used to be in their local budget that they could, either keep in that line and then spend it in another line if they wanted to, but it really, as Lynn said, really, I don't know when it ever went back to the taxpayers. It was used to fund other very wonderful programs, but it was not ever, on the bottom of the line, it was never indicated, okay, well, this much money now can just come off the top. We'll just give that up. It was just part of that big budget. Like for Williston, a $16 million budget, and it might have been like $20,000. It's like kind of lost there. But once you aggregate it together, it's real money.
And speaking from experience, as a principal, when I did it through CVU, you'd get the baseline, you'd have a pile of decision packets to go through, you'd share the decision packets with the board, At the bottom, you'd show all of the scenarios if we took these decision packets, but not these, and applied to that with whatever money I was getting back in retirements as an offset. And maybe some other offsets too that we found. And we'd say, well, look at all the offsets I found, so now it only costs you this to get this great stuff. And that was just business as usual in my view.
For everybody, I think. I mean, I think that that's.
Well, and I think, so here's the leap of faith. Again, our board is going to be challenged with this year. So we have said to administration, here's the pot of money, here are the goals. We have to assume that if they had needed that $122,000, $122,000 to meet those goals, we wouldn't see those in consolidation savings. I'm making the assumption that they can fund what they need to fund.
Well, we're going to show you in the next few weeks, right, what we're funding with that 2.3% that you told us you wanted to come back with. Right? Because it is also true that for all those years, and I was one of those principals, we were not, like throwing that money away. We were spending it on really good programming for kids.
Yes.
Right? So it's not a matter of, like, if the board had said 3.5%, we'd be coming back to you with stuff that we would, in very good conscience, say, this is really wonderful stuff for all of our kids. We're going to get seniors and juniors just like these two if you spend this money. We know that we're in a different situation. Not just because our board said 2.3%, but we just know from the whole context of what's going on in Vermont that it's possible that we're going to be hearing, other news that's going to cause us to think about, okay, well, what's the next thing, right? So we're being really conservative, as Jean has said, and believe that we're going to come to you and present programming that we believe is good programming for our kids. Could we come to you and say, for an extra percent, we could come up with great things? Yes. So it really is going to be, to your point, it's going to be on the board to kind of balance with, okay, this is what they can do with what we gave them. Are we happy with the education that our kids are getting?
Mm-hmm. So next page is the numbers. I realize this is a much smaller set of numbers than you're used to. I'm going to tell you right off the bat that Elaine will be finalizing some decisions with her principals on November 27th, so I don't have all the data to do the entire line item breakdown, but we're working on it, so we'll have it for you on the 5th. But you can see by some real high-level areas, special ed, non-special ed instruction areas, operations, maintenance, and the debt and the total, and it comes to 2.3%.
So to put this timeline together so that you could do this report for today, in following years, do we need to move decisions back into October for you so that you can build this budget?
No, I think we're in good shape. I think that internally, we might have been able to move this November 27th one in a couple of weeks, but it's the first time through. First time Mark and I have done a budget, and we've took a little longer than we wanted to get some things done, but we're here, and I think it'll close by the December 5th. I'm confident that that the budget can come in at the 2.3%.
And honestly, if it weren't Thanksgiving week next week.
Right, it would be next week.
It would be next week. It's just how the calendar happened to work this year.
Okay.
And then I just included the board budget calendar down below, starting with the special ed service plan today, regular ed delivery plan on the 5th of December, operations and maintenance, construction, technology on the 19th, and then the meeting in January where we go through revenue and tax and final approvals. Rough high-level overview, but Megan will have a much nicer, much prettier presentation. So jump to special ed if there's no other questions on this part.
So I'll wait till it makes its way around. But while it's doing that, I'll just say, so last year in particular, and to a certain extent the year before, I spent a lot of time doing a deep dive into sort of what is special ed, what are our responsibilities, how are decisions made, and a lot of context. This does not include that context because you just had that deep dive last year. So obviously if you have questions about kind of what school districts are responsible for providing and how that works, I'm happy to answer that, but not included in this presentation. So really, I'm going to talk about the process and timeline, a kind of a shortened version, so you have a sense of where the numbers come from. And I'll talk about where we are now and what the data looks like so far. And there is some information in here on how we compare across schools. So we'll talk a little bit about that and then answer any questions you have. So the first piece is just kind of a reminder again of the presentation you saw at the retreat about what you're going to see today. Periodically you will get that deeper review of programs, sort of what does it look like, how do we deliver services, what are our best practices, but annually you are getting the numbers that you're getting today. So in here, I won't spend a lot of time on it. There is a visual that shows you how leadership is organized in special education. And I put this in here every year to kind of remind you that the special ed budget is built from the student up and what students are responsible for. And part of the reason we have the leadership structure we do is so that the LEA, who makes the decisions around what gets written in those plans, is located at the building. So these are our schools. This is our special ed leadership team. You'll notice we have a very small portion of a early childhood special ed director. Go ahead.
I just want to underscore what Megan said, because we're probably the only one in the state that does it this way, and I think that it's smart. So Megan has the choice of, or we have the choice of putting all of our administration at the central office. And I think we're the only school district in the state that chooses to instead fund administration at each of the local buildings. So I think that's an important distinction, and I think it does make a big difference for the very thing that Megan shared. It keeps the decision-making closest to the student.
Right. And allows that team to function in, I would argue, is a pretty sophisticated manner to make decisions as a whole. That part of it has evolved over the past few years as we've consolidated, but this special ed leadership team really does sit down and, yes, look at their own building, but they also look at what should we be doing across the system. So those are your leaders. Budget process begins for special ed at the very end of the previous school year. So May, June of last year starts with special educator level. They take a look at all of the students that are currently on their caseload and any students that they anticipate. So we learn about kids coming in to pre-K from our early childhood outreach. We know about the kids exiting CVU and any other unknowns that we know. And they look at what those IEPs say and what we are obligated to provide. Over the summer, the building-based special ed administrator have a chance to take a look at all that kid-level data, check it for accuracy. All the way through this process, they are making edits based on new kids, kids leaving, services changing, so they take a look at that. They take a look at their school-wide services like OT, PT, school psychologists. In the fall, I meet individually with all of them to look at how they compare to themselves over the past few years, how they compare to each other, what their ratios are. The operations team takes a look at what's been entered into the service plan software and all of our staffing and pulls that all together into a budget. And then we, myself and the operations team, meet individually with the principals and special ed director of each school to do kind of a school level analysis of what their service plan is looking like. That's wrapped up right about the time we have to send this to the AOE on October 15th. And then we have a series, and how many in the series depends on where the budget is sitting, of second or third round service plan where we take a look at any changes that have happened, and again, depending on where, what our increases are looking like, we come back to the table around how, what can we do around the budget. You'll probably recall in the past few years, those second and third rounds have been really important to whittle down some increases that looked really high to begin with. That second round hasn't happened yet, so kind of a caveat to what you're seeing tonight. That happens this Thursday, again with the earlier board meeting because of Thanksgiving. We're a little off kilter. So at round 2, which is this Thursday, we'll look at any changes. If pencil sharpening is needed, then that would be the time to do it, and you'll see those changes later on. Any questions on process? All right. The next several slides are a series of charts about both our history and how we compare to each other. I know this is the first time you're seeing it, so I'm going to try to highlight key things that have jumped out for us. If you have questions, ask. You may also have questions later after you have a chance to review it. But this first chart looks at numbers that you see every year around total student count, how many kids on IEPs, how many kids we serve in early childhood, how many on a 504 or EST, how many teachers we have. So this kind of forms the foundation of our comparative data across the district. Some trends that I would highlight, you'll see fluctuations, small fluctuations in the number of SLPs. We are not actually fluctuating in how many speech pathologists we have, but what fluctuates is what percentage of them spend time with early ed. These numbers are primarily K-12 numbers. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we've spent a lot of emphasis getting our special ed density is the term for it, but making sure that we have one special educator for every 50 to 80 total student body number within our schools, because the research tells us that that's the density that allows us to respond effectively to kids on IEPs, incoming kids, MTSS. We continue to pay attention, like the rest of the state, to our paraprofessional numbers. It's really baked into all of the professional development work we're giving. I would say that this year we had seen a downward trend for a while, and we've seen a little bit of an increase in what we're proposing for next year. The increases that we're seeing right now are in the realm of one-on-one paraprofessionals, so supporting kids with significant challenges. So we don't take that lightly, that little increase, and it's something that we're definitely paying attention to. When we get to the numbers part of the budget, though, you'll see we have a significant decrease in outside placement tuition and purchased professional services. Part of the reason for that, some of it is just kids exiting the system. Some of it is we're bringing kids back. And when we bring kids back from those placements, they usually require some level of one-on-one support. So again, we don't take that lightly, but we're pretty comfortable with the reasoning behind some of those ads.
Can you explain why? Not that it's a bad thing to
Yes.
bring the kids back, but I'm assuming that's a conscious decision because of...
I would say that when a decision is made that a student's needs can't be met in our schools and they need to be in a therapeutic placement, it's nearly always done with the intention that they stabilize and gain skills and eventually be able to re-enter our system. For some kids don't. I mean, that's the reality, particularly if you exit in high school. But many kids do come back. And when they come back, it's because often it's that they have stabilized and we've built some capacity in the district. Usually those two things have to happen together.
Thanks.
So the next slide is just some information because people often ask, is the severity of need changing in the district? So those are our patterns of disability category. The caveat here is there are pretty small fluctuations really in the numbers of mild, moderate, and severe disability, which is sort of how they're calculated here. So we don't see this as a sweeping, we have 20% more kids with severe disabilities and, fewer kids with mild. We don't see those kinds of swings. I would still remind you of the presentations that you've been hearing around kids experiencing trauma. Those kids don't always show up they're not always eligible for special education. So our special ed patterns of disability have not changed, but our student population is still different than it has been. Yeah, Wes.
So, looking at the numbers, the CVSD district chart, a number of things jump out at me. The Triple-E child count has increased significantly for the last 4 years. The EST number has declined significantly, and the number of special ed teachers has grown quite a bit.
Yep.
It's grown by 3,
Yep.
I guess, in the last 3 or 4 years. So, any comments you'd like to make on that?
Definitely. I would, and those are all patterns, some of which we're excited about. Let me excited is the wrong word. So I would say the Triple-E child count, we serve a whole lot more kids now, not in special ed, but in early learning partnerships, which means more kids are accessing publicly funded pre-K. We have an early childhood outreach special educator. I think we're finding more pre-K kids, and that's a good thing. Normally, we don't want high percentages of kids eligible for special ed, but when it comes to early intervention, we want to
identify them early.
Exactly.
Hopefully they're more prepared when they get to kindergarten.
Yes, and often roll off IEPs when in their first few years. So that number, I think, is highly correlated to we have connection to more kids now at the early ed. EST is also, oddly, an exciting trend, and that's because
tell me again, what is EST?
Okay, so EST is Educational Support Team. It's Vermont's law to require that we don't just identify kids for special ed, that we find out when they're struggling early and we provide Tier 2 interventions, hopefully to prevent eligibility for special ed. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we've spent a lot of time unifying our EST processes across the district. What we found is not necessarily that schools actually had huge differences in kids receiving help, but they had differences in when they decided that kid needed to be formalized, the team needed to formalize those services in an EST plan. So for example, one school, every time a student sees a reading specialist and gets a little bit of extra help, they would put them on an EST plan. In another school, that same kid receiving that same kind of intervention, that would be considered an early monitoring, and it wouldn't be put on an EST plan. So this, to me, is not necessarily evidence of fewer kids getting support, it's evidence of us having more consistent practices in who we put on EST plans and not. And then the special educator staff, I think that is related to a couple of things. We've spent a concerted effort, and you'll see this later on the school-by-school breakdown, but if you looked at that data historically, we had some schools that had the special ed density where we want it, and other schools that really didn't have enough professional special educators. That was particularly true at CVU. When I first started, they had probably one special educator for every 120 students. That's way out of that range, makes it really hard for them to respond. Over time, they have consistently reduced paraprofessionals, added professionals. So by bringing them into the alignment, we have increased the total number of special educators we have. We've also slowly decreased, it fluctuates, but our child count numbers go down with our enrollment. So by nature, those ratios are going to start looking far lower. When I pay attention to the numbers here, I and our team is pleased with the ratio of professionals. We want to spend our energy thinking, now that we have our professional density where we want it, we really need to look at, we shouldn't need so many paraprofessionals now that we're staffed properly on the professional end.
One last question I had. So, 11 and 12%, those are rounded. I mean,
Yeah.
it's consistently between 11 and 12,
Yes.
and I'm not sure there's really a trend with that. But how does that compare to statewide numbers or Chittenden County or
Yep.
wherever else we might look?
We're low. Statewide average is between 14 and 15%. And Chittenden County is right about the statewide average there. They hover there. And our schools, our ranges, we used to have schools as low as 8% and as high as 14. So our school with the highest percentage is like 13.8%, and that's CVU, which makes sense because they kind of have everyone. So we are below the state average in how many, in percentage of kids we identify.
Thank you.
Yep. Anything else? There's a lot of data that goes into that one chart, so I realize there's probably a lot of questions. So the chart that's after the disability category is just how your schools compare across each other. And this is always current year data, and it's always point in time data, so just understand that kids become eligible and not eligible, kids move in. In one day, a week and a half ago, I had 3 different conversations with your building-based administrators. We had 4 students move in, all not to the same school, but in the course of a day, 4 relatively needy kids move into the district. That happens. So just know that these are point-in-time numbers. A lot of the highlights that I talked about in answering Russ's questions are relevant to these numbers too. The last page shows where we sit in terms of service plan to service plan change. So overall, the end answer to where we are at this moment, our special ed budget has a very small increase year to year. Smallest increase I've seen to date, and it's driven by a couple of key things. Yes, there's the benefit reduction that we're sort of seeing across the board for teachers. It's a big decrease in outside placement tuition directly tied to kids exiting the system and a couple of kids moving back in. But we've had a couple of very individually costly students leave the system, either by moving or aging out. Transportation is up a little bit. That's not unusual for transportation to be up. But our overall increase right now is sitting at about 0.4%. That's very low. That's good. That puts the special ed budget in a very good place. On Thursday, we will start the conversation with what has changed since these numbers went in. We already know the 4 kids that I mentioned. At least one of them has an outside placement attached to them. We tend not to change that right away when it's a new kid moving in because we need to get to know them before we decide if we can bring them back. And a couple of those other students probably will require some level of staffing. Right now, the kids are in the buildings. Administrators are getting to know them, trying to see if we can cover it with existing supports. But we're going to know starting Thursday whether or not they were able to do that. So this number may change. If that number goes up, it will also point us in the direction of how we need to sharpen our pencil so that these numbers stay in alignment with what the board is looking for. Questions?
Do we track data that, so we're doing these different things, like social emotional learning, we have PBIS, we have a lot of different, like multi-tiered systems of support, we have a lot of different things that we're doing to try and help kids, and I'm wondering if there's any way that we're tracking, since we implemented MTSS, we've seen a decline, since PBIS, we've seen this decline, since SEL, this decline. Like, is there a way to track these other programs that we're doing with a decline or increase, or it's just not correlated at all?
Yep, outcome data. It is something that we look at all the time. We have lots of different measures of outcome. Mm-hmm. It's also really elusive to tie really good outcome measures. Some of the things that we look at are, now that since we've implemented MTSS, some of the data in the charts that we see have to do with how many referrals to special ed we have, and of those referrals, how many kids end up being eligible. We have far fewer referrals that end up not being eligible. In other words, we're not evaluating kids and then finding out they don't meet criteria. By the time we evaluate them, they really need special ed. That's an easy tie back to MTSS, because that means that many kids that were struggling, teams are ending up not needing to refer them because they're making progress. So that's a pretty tight measure that we have. We have I think, the biggest question that we always ask ourselves is, are we accelerating learning? Are we narrowing the gap between kids who have disabilities and kids who don't? And I would say that we still struggle with that measure, just like every other school in the nation, partially because we don't have great measures that take into consideration individual growth, acceleration against themselves, their own performance. I think as we get better at proficiency-based learning and understanding how to teach kids, we're going to have those types of outcome data. We've had a moderate decrease in kids eligible for special ed with mild disabilities. So that would be specific learning disabilities, speech and language impairment. I think this is a correlation, not a causation, but I also think that has to do with we can meet many of those kids' needs through our intervention system. And the kids that are eligible for special ed are ones that will likely need support all the way through school. So those are some of the things we look at, but there's many more pieces of data. Yeah.
We're paying tuition to outside agencies. Like, where are we placing at? Maybe you can't say, like, what kind of places in the state are we talking about?
Typically, we're fortunate to be in Chittenden County, so the Howard Center, the Baird School, we have a school called Belkate for high school kids, a school called Mosaic, the Garvin School, which is also under the Howard umbrella. So those are our typical placements. We have a few students going to Montpelier, to the new school. Those are the ones that we hear a lot about.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions on special education? No? Okay, thanks. That was great. 7.2, anticipated board member openings. So there are some elections that are up in 2018, and just curious, who is going to run, and are there people we need to look for? I know it's noted that Lynn is up in 2020, but you're actually up this year. That's one.
Well, I have to be voted by the town.
Right. So, pardon? Yeah.
I guess I'm not comfortable having this conversation right now, because basically, I can only speak for myself, but you're asking at least 4 members here to basically declare their intentions 5 months before election. As one of those people, I'm not prepared to do that yet. And it doesn't mean I don't want to run. It doesn't mean I do want to run. It just means I don't think this is an appropriate time for me to make that decision.
Okay.
So.
Well, I think one of the things we were just trying to do is let people know that the same process still plays out, where you have to get your signatures by the end of January in order to get on the ballot. If folks are going to run or aren't going to run and feel comfortable saying that, that's fine. I understand your wishes, but
I think it's a great conversation to have with the board chair for the superintendent, but I'm not sure if I'm comfortable having it in public at this time.
okay. All right.
Who is up for election, just out of curiosity? We're not doing that, right?
Yeah, it's on the website. It's myself, Brendan, Joan, and Eric, and you.
And so where your concern was more of a process question, that people needed to know that there's a signature page necessary for January.
Yeah,
and
this is
that
kind of our
there's-
last meeting as a group before then. If you're thinking of running,
That's
please
definitely
run.
worth having a conversation about.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody understands what needs to be done.
Yep.
my intent is to run. Getting those signatures are very difficult. I think that's definitely, you know, at least for me, you know, it takes a lot of time. And I live like in the woods, so I can't go and knock on my neighbor's door. I just want to do people there.
School, band concert at holidays.
You know, so I actually did that. I stood outside of the schools at the last year, and it wasn't well received by the parents.
Oh, you think they want to meet you?
Yeah, well, no, that was not well received.
Just give me your phone.
All right. So, anybody want to comment or anything? No? Okay. So, 7.3, one of the things that we said at our retreat was we would revisit how the board was doing versus its board goals and mission on a regular basis. And so we put this on here as one point. There was something specific in our executive committee meeting that sort of triggered this. I can't remember what it was.
We were talking about the flow of the meeting and that we have two presentations.
Yeah.
But I think we got to, we'll let it go the way it's going this year.
Yep.
And that's a retreat topic.
Yep.
And that kind of got us to, right, we do have quarterly on the work plan, an opportunity to just say, well, how is it feeling as a merged board? Does it feel like it's cohesive? You're doing the work that you were hoping to do, that it's moving along the way it should? Or there are some takeaways that we should hear and, see what we can do to improve things?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to reflect and not wait till the retreat to say, I've been wondering about this, that, or the other thing. Not to belabor it.
Yeah.
Well, I put up, I did say, I thought the presentations took a lot of time, and I feel it takes away a little bit from what I thought we were trying to be, which was more of a policy, big picture board. And the best example of that to me is last month's meeting, where we have this huge wellness policy, right, that has pretty apparently big implications to the district. I think we spent 5 minutes talking about it. And so I'm wondering, when we say we're a policy board, what does that mean, and are we really doing it? Or if we're not doing it, do we want to be doing it? That's kind of where I am right now. I feel like we're still kind of figuring it all out. But I honestly don't know what it means to be a policy board.
Also, are we putting together a policy subcommittee like we had previously? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would help.
I would totally agree. Lynn and I, while the presentations are really informative, I'm concerned about the flow of the meeting, that we have, that we're not getting to some really difficult and needed discussions and decisions until late in the evening. And I think people's concentration and what we know about brain research, that 2.5 hours after 2 hours of lecture is not going to be an optimal time to really engage in that kind of work. So put those comments in before, I think, but I hope that we can think flexibly maybe about how we reshape some things in the beginning and going forward, whether it's at the end of this year or sooner, but so that we have some more of that time, and that it isn't like, oh man, this is important, but it's 8:55, so God, I'm going to try not to say anything. Like, I think we need to make time for those things.
I agree with her, sorry.
Russ had a question.
No, I was just going to say, to me, this board feels a lot like the CSSU board did, except for we don't have to go back to our constituent boards to have certain issues discussed or sometimes rubber stamped or whatever we were doing. But, to the time thing, for people who were on both the CSSU board and their constituent boards, we're 4 hours.
Yeah.
We were 5 to 7 and 7 to 9. Now we're starting at 6. To me, and yes, I would be just as happy to get home at 8 or something earlier. But to me, I don't think that having a 3 and sometimes 3+ hour meeting should be unexpected for what we're doing, especially, because we really only meet once a month. I mean, we do have committee meetings that, we're trying to do, somewhat regularly, and depending on the committee you're on, there are times of year where you may be meeting more frequently, like budget, or when we're in negotiations and that sort of thing, but, like it or not, to me, a 3 to 4 hour meeting is probably what we ought to expect every, third Tuesday of the month, or whatever the day is we're supposed to be meeting.
And to be
Threw me
clear,
all
it's
off
not
this
the
one.
length of the meeting, it's how the time is
effectiveness,
used.
Okay.
I think we're missing, I agree the presentations are important, but I feel like we're smushing board work into this really small segment, and I feel like, we rubber stamped we're about to rubber stamp a wellness policy that we really don't know anything about, other than that food cannot be used as reward or punishment. I mean, and so when we call ourselves a policy board, what does that say?
Well, I guess at the same time, the discussion tonight about phys ed, could they have done it in half the time? Perhaps.
Or at 8 o'clock.
But, there were some interesting things that, for me, that came out of that, that, even if we wanted to give more time, we don't have enough gyms. So,
We have $600,000 though.
The last.
No, we
the
don't.
The last one we had, we were talking, about sort of alternative paths and that sort of thing. And it's like, okay, so, what are we doing to encourage more of this when they're freshmen and sophomores, instead of when we're, saving it all until you're a junior and a senior? So, I don't know if some of those nuggets are going to come out if we don't have these sorts of presentations, that hearing from the people in the trenches, and yeah, you might only take away 1 or 2 or 3 things from a 45-minute conversation, but we're probably going to come away with different nuggets from this, and I think it's important to hear those, and then to say, okay, Jeff, how are we following up on that, and how do we make freshmen and sophomores able to, do more of these things, instead of having to wait until they're juniors and seniors and just dying their freshman and sophomore years because they're not able to pursue some of the things they really want to pursue.
Brendan?
It was covered, thank you.
Okay.
I think to Lynn's point though, and if I can remember back when we were talking about consolidation and board direction, and I talk fast because I feel that need to rush the point, but yes to presentations, and I think it's very important to see people in the trenches too, but I feel like right now we're still in reactionary mode as a new board. We're still sort of in consolidation. We're trying to deal with a quick budget. We're trying to learn about that. We're trying to identify things. But in this, on the same path, parallel, we need to really think about who and what our goals are, bigger picture as a board. And do we need to have this information? Yes, but to what end? Are we advising on a budget? Are we advising on policy? My time on the SU board, we weren't really a policy board, right? We saw the policy, we reviewed the policy, I read the policies, but we didn't have, maybe 3 times in my entire 6 years did we have a real heated policy discussion about something. Is that the direction? I don't know either. But maybe that's a bigger conversation to discuss, and I don't know if that's retreat, or.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean, it wasn't about a time commitment, it was about the effectiveness of our time and whether we're using it and talking about things at a time when people are fresh. It's not about the quantity, but how we're using it. So, sorry if I
I was
miscommunicated.
just going to say that I think Lynn and Jean did a really good job of changing just reorienting the budget process and conversation to make it a higher level policy type approach. But not to get in the weeds, but I do think with those presentations, you could maybe impose a little discipline on the presenters and just have a standard or a best practice and say, look, don't read your slides. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to come prepared, we're going to have hopefully some of the information in advance and, kind of hit the high points, and then let's have some Q&A to tease out the stuff that Russ was talking about. But maybe just develop a little more rigor around that, and that could help.
Yep. Yeah.
I just want to follow up on Eric's comment. I think that's a great comment. I think these presentations are vital. We can't forget, we need to hear from the folks in the trenches, like you said. We need to understand, there's this 3-year cycle, there's a lot going on, and we can't just walk away from that. However, it does take up a significant amount of our time, and if we can come up with a way perhaps to communicate to those teams what we need to hear so we are best informed and know more. We might be able to make it a smaller presentation in time with a bigger impact.
So there was a time when somebody came to Shelburne and had 30 minutes to give a presentation and spent about 50 to 55 minutes. And it was really painful. And so what I said, I said to Elaine, when we do these, tell these people they have 30 minutes and include time for questions. And I will say that I think they spent 35 tonight doing the presentation. And they started, but I just want to say, I'm totally with you, and we're making progress. I know I don't have the full sample, but it's getting better, but agree. Yes, Amanda.
So I think what we need to do is maybe take a step back from just tonight's meeting and look at our work overall as a board. We are now down to 12 members, and we have a lot of subcommittee work. We have disciplinary hearings, which coming from a K-8, I've never been to before, and man, I am drinking from a fire hose. But I think we need to look at all the time that we're gonna need to develop or devote to the board, make sure we don't burn out, and make sure that the time that we are spending together is focused and deliberate. So, I don't know if we want to break it out by time segment and really try and stick to it, but I mean, even we ourselves as a board, we have this agenda, and then we'll say we'll do 15 minutes on this, and 45 minutes later we're on to something else. So I think maybe we collectively as a board need to find our focal points, prioritize them, have our priorities saying, okay, maybe policy isn't one of them, or maybe a subset of policy is, but I think before we can have specific conversations around the presentations that we hear from staff and, on the different topics, it should only be half an hour. I think we need to know the whole big picture. We're going to be spending, on average, given historical data, because I'm a data person, we had, one disciplinary hearing every 2 weeks, and 12 board members, you need to have 6, so that's 1 a month for you. And then you have these subcommittee work, and this is what the subcommittee work is going to look like. So then at our big meetings, I think we just need a much, much bigger picture, and we need to break it out much clearer. I'm a big data person, so I think we really need to have more data in our conversations and priorities before we can really get this down. So maybe I'm saying it's a retreat topic.
Yeah, Brendan?
I don't think we know that yet, though, because, we were on the K-8 board, which is very different. So I think that over next year, we might be able to say, here's a time for this, here's a time for that. But, I think that we're just working in a very different environment that we don't all know yet, and we're just trying to conform to.
We have some of the data, though, on average, this many disciplinary hearings, on average, this many committees that we had previously. And I get you, I heard you saying, we definitely don't know everything, and everything's going to be different every year, but I think that would help.
Great, Thomas?
I just want to add to the discussion about presentations. I think that they could certainly be more concise, but I think that we definitely need to keep them. Because when I was on the CV board, we would talk a lot about what was going on in CVU. And it says in the first point on the budget presentation, the board roles and responsibilities. Board represents the community and what it expects of the educational system. And how do we know, as a board, what the educational system is if we aren't actually seeing what the curriculum is, hearing from people in the trenches, and we're just talking about policy.
That's right. Thanks. Yeah, I think one of the goals I feel like one of the good things we've done is commit that other Tuesday to having that just for committees. I feel like in the past, when we said, oh, we'll meet this, and then how many committees kind of just sort of, hey, has anybody done that food service committee? We're like, nah, we haven't gotten to that. So I think the first role is to kind of figure out how much work are we getting done on these committees, and then maybe next step is to evaluate at the retreat. You know, are we getting enough done in these committee meetings on this Tuesday? Is that an effective format? And are we missing things? Are there, you know, there's spin-offs that happen all the time, like from negotiations, there were 2 committees that were supposed to be set up. Maybe they're already set up, done, and resolved, and the memo's been written, but, so that's, I think, I like that we are spending that extra Tuesday and we have it in our schedule. I think it helps build good muscle memory for dedicating time to school board. I will say that I feel like it's harder to be a board chair of CVSD than it is to be a board chair of CSSU. So it's one thing.
So one thing we also do for our planning of what we review on our board meetings, we have like a 3-year cycle. I think we need to look farther out than just 1 year on our board work, particularly for subcommittees, because, for instance, the negotiations committee definitely has a lighter year this year, but I know come next fall, it's gonna be every week and we'll be doing stuff. So having like that longer, bigger picture with our priorities, kind of like how you run a business. What is the board's little mini mission and vision, and how's that going to play out in terms of priorities, and how does that drive our agendas?
All right. So I think our mini therapy session on how the board's going is,
I took a lot of notes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's helpful, actually.
yeah, it is helpful. I just
Thank you.
felt the urge to make a joke, so
It was good.
I was only below the hard deck for a few seconds.
like it.
So I took the
Perfect.
shot.
Love
We have no action matters. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Our next meeting dates, there is a finance meeting on 28th and the 12th here at CVU. Communications Committee will meet after our January 9th meeting, and then the budget schedule starts December 5th at 6 at the Charlotte School Library. So that's our next full board meeting. And hopefully all of our budget buddies will be there.
And they'll sit at the table with us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Anything else? Did I miss anything? No? Okay, we have no executive session, so get a motion to adjourn? Second? Adjourn. All right.
Well, I was drooling.
You have one for both? I mean, if the person's gonna show up for every meeting, yeah. I think,